asked him about the road, but he said we're going to get a full discussion, just like we have a topic.
Yeah, I would just kind of,
Yeah, after we get done, then I'll bring him up.
it doesn't matter to me.
We'll get him to talk.
Plus, if he wanted to leave, he could.
Yeah.
So, what we'll probably do is have them do the presentation, whoever's doing it, and then talk, and then we can go up there
Yeah.
to have our discussion at that point.
We have our discussion and let him
You guys are
come in afterwards.
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll let him talk because we may answer his question.
That's fine. It depends.
You guys are live.
So, that's fine.
Get caught up. Are we ready? Now that I'm here?
yes.
Okay. Good evening. I call to order the council meeting for February 11th. This will be our regular council meeting. And we'll start with the invocation. Those that wish to can please rise.
Those who would, bow your head. Dear Lord, we come to you tonight as a governing body. As leaders, we typically ask for good stewardship, wisdom in our decisions. But help us to remember our leadership is more than those things. Our leadership for what we should be doing for our community is other things that should set an example in our community. Those things should involve compassion, care, and love. May we remember to do those things, that as we do them, that they cascade down and out through our community and have a reflection on our people and to others outside our community. I ask you those things. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Can you please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Leeton,
Here.
Mr. Owen,
Here?
Mr. Graves,
Here.
Mr. Eckert,
Here.
Mrs. Hughes.
Okay.
Mrs. Hughes is on the telephone, just so the audience knows. Mayor Ellis is absent. Quorum present.
And approval of tonight's agenda. Any changes or deletions?
I'm on mute, right? Hello?
Yes.
I can't. I was, sorry, I zoomed in. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. This is
Okay,
Steve.
good. Just making sure I was here.
Yeah.
Just making sure you could hear me.
Yep, you're here.
I believe a correction to the agenda would be the amount that we're going to consider for the general obligation renewal should be 1629 as opposed to 1628. I believe.
Okay. Make that correction to item 5, 1629 instead of 12628.
Move to approve the agenda as revised.
Second,
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. And that'd be
Aye.
500. Okay, that brings us to citizens' participation. We have 2. And one of them we'll take during the discussion item of Cora. The first one will be Chad Ollenbrand.
All right. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Chad Allenbrand, 20929 Maple Terrace. I wanted to come here tonight and ask about plans to widen 199th Street to a 4-lane corridor through Spring Hill, Kansas. During an Edgerton, Kansas, Planning Commission meeting this past week, representatives from North Point Development discussed proposals for rezoning parcels of land to the west of Spring Hill to support a commercial and industrial development. Comments were made during that meeting that 199th Street is planned to become a 4-lane corridor between the Edgerton Intermodal and the Richards-Gebauer Intermodal. Comments were also made during that meeting stating, you have 50 trucks today on this road, you will have thousands in the future. Is the city of Spring Hill working with the county and the neighboring cities on this expansion they discussed? And how does this impact the roundabout being developed at 199th and Ridgeview? There was an extensive 5-county study done by the Kansas Department of Transportation between 2010 and 2014 that seems to back up these statements. And from that 5-county regional transport study, the conclusion was to widen 199th Street to a 4-lane arterial street from US 56 to I-49 US 71. Each of the 3 street corridors, 175th, 199th, and 223rd, showed the potential for increased traffic volumes that would require widening. 199th Street scored the highest of the 3 and is therefore recommended. There was also discussion of 207th Street becoming a truck route, but I could not find any documentation to support or deny those claims. My ask is that the city investigate these claims made by the Edgerton Planning Commission and North Point Development to understand the impacts of not only a large-scale commercial and industrial development being planned to the west of us, but also what are the impacts or benefits to the community, and to get in front of this instead of being behind it and allowing Edgerton to annex further east into Spring Hill. So Spring Hill is specifically mentioned in that planning commission, being one of the cities that this corridor would go through.
I know we do have.
Sorry, we weren't trying to talk, we were talking about, some things.
Mr. Hendershot, do you have any comments you can give him at all at this time?
I mean, to lead into that, we have known about the 199th Street corridor. The roundabout in question, the roundabout design, I believe, accounts for the current numbers, but it's, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hendershot, there's plans for years down the road for how it might have to expand, and that was in the design, and also working with Johnson County on that. I think also right now, is it kind of designed to be, as they improve it, a Super 2, then to be expandable into a 4-lane, or is that still the case?
There have been multiple studies about 4-lane roads east and west through the area over the years. I am familiar with the one that Mr. Allenbrand is talking about. I'm just not aware that it's gained any momentum. I'm not aware of any plans through Johnson County to expand 199th to 4 lanes. I have not been contacted about any such plans. The only plans I'm aware of are those that are the improvement that you mentioned that's scheduled for 2022 to an improved 2-lane. I agree with Mr. Allenbrand's suggestion. I will contact City of Edgerton and see where these comments are coming from. And also, I've already begun my work to attempt to understand their annexation plans.
Okay, all right. That help you out?
Yes, thank you.
And just so you know, Mr. Allenbrand, this has been something that's been on the radar for years, and we keep making sure that we keep that in front of us. Especially years ago when the intermodal was put in, because I've been an advocate for the traffic and the issues that have been coming, and with the trucks. People used to sit there and say that trucks aren't gonna go down 199th, and they kept saying, no, it's the shortest distance between points, they're gonna do it. And that's what we are seeing now. So, it is on our radar, and we are trying to account for it, but to plan out a certain year period out ahead of us, it's kind of difficult to be able to put the price tag on that, like a 15, 20-year plan. We
I think
have
there's
to work with the county on
I
that.
think there's a lot of movement going on out west of Spring Hill right now. I think everybody's kind of aware of, not that it's city, but, those are our neighbors and part of our community. That is Spring Hill out there, and they've got some, a lot of things going on that, really make you wonder how this is becoming this way, and, how all those trucks are going to, make those routes back and forth, whether it's 223rd or 199th. That's going to impact us directly as that happens.
And like Mr. Eckert and I were talking about one other night, was it's not just Edgerton, it's also Gardner that's coming in. So I think that a number of us here on the governing body are aware and trying to make sure that we are properly planning forward to make sure that we're not, caught trying to catch up.
Yeah, right now, my big concern is, the roundabout spending, we're spending, good amount of capital to investment to do that, and then the potential of can it expand big enough, because if their numbers are correct, if they go from hundreds to thousands of trucks, I mean, you're talking about a semi-truck passing through there every minute and a half. So is a roundabout really realistic for semis to be passing through at that rate? So,
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Boswell?
I'm Steve Boswell, 504 Jackson, North Jackson. To kind of go on what he was saying about the roundabouts and the semi-trucks, there's a roundabout down here on 169 highway, about 40 miles down, and semi-trucks seem to go around it just fine. Just saying, I'm not trying to disagree with him, but I am saying that they do make that roundabout just fine, and there's quite a bit of heavy truck traffic traveling down 169. The other thing I wanted to actually ask, I had a question, was apparently there was a complaint about my Christmas decorations still being up in January. I'm not aware that it's a code violation, but apparently when I was in court last, I was told it was a violation. My attorney had told me that it was told to him that it was a violation of code. So my question is, when are we supposed to have our Christmas decorations down? Mine were pulled down the first Wednesday of the month in February. So my question is, when are they supposed to have been taken down in order to avoid any issues?
Mr. Hendershot, can we deal with this maybe after the meeting? You meet with him, or what would you recommend?
I'm happy to visit with Mr. Boswell after the meeting, yes.
Yeah. He can give you some better answers.
Yeah, I think the public also needs to know, because I scoured the books and I still could not find anything about that. So that's why I was curious.
All right.
Kind of a public thing needs to know. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Council President Owen, Mr. Burton, I think, has some
Yes.
information.
Actually, what was brought up in court was not that the Christmas lights were not taken down. It was that they were all not secured well, and they were hanging and flopping and things of that nature.
Okay.
There's been no notification to Mr. Boswell on this officially, and no, there is not anything in our codes that read when you're officially supposed to take down Christmas lights, or if you can have them up.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, that'll close our citizen participation. Now, presentations. It'll be Chief Francis.
Good evening.
They knew you wanted it.
There we go.
Yep, okay, so I just need to push that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good evening. So I'm here tonight to go over our 2020 performance measures. I normally wear glasses, so bear with me. I can't with this mask on, as you guys probably know. They get fogged up immediately. All right, so 2020 wasn't too far off from 2019 data. We had a little bit of increase in calls, but not much. So as you'll see, we had 213 fire responses in the city, 499 EMS responses in the city, totaling 712 responses in the city. The vast majority of those come out of the station in town. Several of those are multiple unit responses where trucks from Lackman or even the station on Metcalf or even Mission Road also respond. In 19, our data was 191 fire responses, 516 EMS, and 707 calls total. So then to break that down, the contract area, and let me jump ahead here. So if you see the map, the pointer's not going to show up on the map. I think everybody hopefully knows what's the contract and what's not the contract. So the old part of town, Woodland to Lone Elm, North Street to South Street, that 1 square mile is the contract area, plus all the portion of the city that's in Miami County. Everything outside that, north of 215th Street, is in our taxing district within the boundaries of Fire District 2. So when we look at our data, we kind of break it down twofold. So in the contract area, 165 calls, fire calls, 404 EMS, totaling 569. And then the new growth areas of the city, the new subdivisions that are developing within the taxing district, that call volume's coming up a little bit every year. So we're up to 143 total for 2020. 48 of those were fire calls, 95 were EMS calls. So any questions about any of that?
There is, if I
Okay.
can go back. Last year or the year before, we talked about an extraordinary amount of calls to rest homes, nursing homes type.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So 19 or 18, we had a big spike on calls to the assisted living and to the nursing home. And a lot of them had to do with lift assist and other assist calls where their staff would call us down there. And that was not just a trend that we saw here locally, but it was a trend throughout the United States where fire EMS are running more calls to these facilities because of policies that the staff had, that those facilities had, where they couldn't touch patients or pick up patients, and they called us. That was not only occurring here, it was occurring everywhere. And a lot of Johnson County departments saw big spikes in that. So this is something we touched base with our medical director on. I know there were a lot of conversations with staff of these facilities. So whatever happened, I don't know, but the numbers have gone back down. We don't see the spike like we used to. So we've seen a positive trend there. So that's something we keep an eye on. I do know for about 6 months during that period of time, we were watching it very closely because for whatever reason, the numbers really went up for a very short period of time, but they have kind of leveled off since then. But good question. So the response times, the turnout time, and just to refresh your memory, the turnout time is the time we get the call, from the time our radios go off to the time the wheels are in motion. And we try and get out the door within 60 seconds, and our average is 58. So we're hitting the mark there. And our EMS travel times for all the calls in the city was 4 minutes, 21 seconds on average. And our fire travel times were about 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Now I can tell you that our back-to-back calls in Spring Hill are something we watch very closely. They're between 25 and 30% of the time the station in Spring Hill's on a call, they're going to be on another call, either in the city or right around the city out of that station. So over the last few years, we've been concentrating to increase staffing at that facility, and we have done so. We have 5 fire personnel and a battalion chief assigned and 2 paramedics and Johnson County Medic Ambulance. So we can handle back-to-back calls. A lot of times, we may get back-to-back-to-back calls. But we're always shifting resources around to cover to make sure that we have units available in the city. So any question on the response times? Training public education. 2020 obviously is a strange year for all of us for many reasons. We had the pandemic and it affected a lot of the things we do from training to public education, especially public education and our contacts with the general public. You know, for months our buildings were on lockdown. To some degree they still are. So our public education programs went way down. Our crews got a little creative, and on some of the elementary schools they actually did remote visits, which was a neat thing to do. but they were able to continue those. But a lot of our mass gathering, public type show and tell things, we just couldn't do. So the numbers on the people that we contacted because of the virus was reduced. Any questions on that? Significant fire losses in the city last year. We had two main ones that come to mind. We had a duplex on fire in the middle of the night on the 1600 block of South Main. That's that fire on the left. It had well-involved garage and car and the inside of the house. Everybody got out safely. I don't believe there was any injuries that night. And then Christmas Eve, we had a fire on West Nichols Street. That's it on the right. Significant damage throughout the house and the back of the house. Covered porch area on the back of the house. Total structure fire loss in the city was $265,450, and the value saved on both those properties was $582,550. Other things we've done in the city in the last year, if you drive by the station a lot earlier in the year last year, you would have noticed we had a lot going on the outside of the building. We had a deteriorating retaining wall and front steps, and we had an ADA parking stall that was no longer code compliant because of the slope of it and undermining of the slab because of drainage problems. So we did a lot of work there. We changed the grade on the front, put in some new steps, new ADA accessible parking, put in a new sign, and fixed some of the drainage problems. So that was a pretty big investment we made. And then we've recently took delivery of a 2020 Kenworth pumper tanker truck that's in the Spring Hill Station. That's approximately $330,000. And then we just received a new brush rig that's in the Spring Hill Station to run the city and surrounding areas. We built that F-350 from Unruh Fire Equipment in Sedgwick, Kansas, and that was about $85,000 invested. So be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
I do.
You do, go ahead.
What is your current staffing percentage? Are you full boat?
I didn't hear you.
Your current staffing percentages? Are you fully staffed, or are you still looking for firemen?
We are fully staffed right now. Staffing at the station, we have 5 people assigned plus a battalion chief, plus 2 from Johnson County Medac. So there's typically between 7 and 8 people in the building 24/7. We don't presently have any positions that we're filling. So does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Mr. Lead, anything?
Typically, we get, Chief Francis, all the data. You at least provide us the data to look at, like previous year to this year. Am I missing it? It's not in the, I don't think it's in the notes here. I'm looking.
I did provide this data electronically. I think
Was
I
that sent
provided
an email to us? Did I miss that?
I know in previous years when I got here, I
I'm just,
couldn't portray this on the board, so I converted most of the same data that's on here into the PowerPoint. But if you want, I can email these to you. It's pretty much the same data. It's probably a little more of the same data.
it's more granular.
Yeah, but I can certainly send that over.
I've just gotten
That'd be
used to
great.
seeing that.
I'm trying to, because this we couldn't blow up, last time we couldn't blow it up big enough to read it.
Yes.
And that's
That's
fine.
yeah.
I would just still like to see the
Okay.
Okay.
smaller metadata, is what I would call it, so.
Mr. Graves, anything?
All right.
Ms. Hughes,
Thank you.
any
I
questions?
don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chief, thank you very much. We do. Oh, Mr. Boswell. Mr. Boswell, you have a question?
Yeah, for that fire that happened on the, Christmas Eve, we just happened to be outside, and we saw that the, emergency equipment, I live on 504 Jackson, so I don't exactly know where this fire was, but we saw emergency equipment go down, Allen Street, and we also saw it go down, the street right by our house, which would be, but there's a street right up from us, and it seemed as though they might have been disoriented, or was there an issue with
We had about 6 or 7 pieces of apparatus for that night. It gets very congested and right in front, so we have units intentionally come in from different angles to get better proximity to the structure. So they may have come in primarily from the east, they may come in from the west, the north, or even the south. And we literally have, there's been 4 or 5 stations respond to that, so arrival at different times and different vehicles.
Yes, it looked a little different, that's why I was.
Chief, thank your crews for their good work for us. Appreciate it. Miss Landis?
All right, thank you. One of the most fun things you can do as a department head is talk about your staff. So I'm sure that as every one of our department heads have been putting together their annual reports, they probably had some aha moments where they saw the list of things that you accomplished in one year. Because when you're moving and grooving all year long, you really don't notice everything that's happening. But it's fun to put it together and be able to show you some of the things that we've accomplished in the last year. So our department is finance and administrative services, and in our department we have 8 full and part-time staff, as well as the aquatic center seasonal staff. And 5 of those staff are admin staff, 4 of them full-time, 1 part-time. And 3 of them are really associated with the accounting function in our department, 1 with utility billing, and then we have a facility manager, custodian, and 2 evening or part-time facility supervisors that handle the facility management portion. Our mission and vision is really that, without reading this all to you, I think it's important that you have a mission and vision for your department. We recently went back and taken a look at this. We might make some tweaks to it, but really we view ourselves as the hub of everything that's going on, and we are the internal customer service, and we are able to assist departments for whatever it is that they need. Often it seems as though it's just monetary, and making sure that it's just the financial management portion, but we also handle a lot of the back end portion of how payments get processed, how reporting gets done, the training that happens internally for system use, all of the software that's used internally related to the accounting side. So we do a lot of that, and in addition to that outward facing customer service, we deal with a lot of people that aren't your typical customers of city services, but more along the lines of consultants. We have title companies. We work with the state, and often, just all of those outside people that you wouldn't typically see as your regular customers, as well as all of our vendors and our employees for payroll and AP. So I did break this down through all of our functions. So to talk a little bit about facility management, it seems like maybe last year was the year that we wouldn't have a whole lot going on, but actually, as it turns out, we did. And we did manage about 775 facility reservations last year. Remember, we had a good 3 months of use at the beginning, plus we had internal facility reservations and some throughout the remainder of the year, all while adhering and implementing CDC standards. We did continue our use of the facilities for Wi-Fi for those that needed it for either working from home or for their education needs. And then also we did go through the facilities and update our AEDs. And we also, this is exciting for me, we were able to get our new facility manager has been Red Cross certified to become a trainer. And what that means is that going forward in our future years of both the aquatic center and for our staff, she is now certified to be able to train our lifeguards, and she can also train on CPR, first aid AEDs. Our focus for the 2021 year is bringing to you a reopening plan for the aquatic center, bringing back to you a reopening plan for the civic center and community center as those restrictions start to lift, and it allows us to do so. Creating a program so that we are training our own lifeguards, doing that on site, and then also providing some on-site training for our staff. For utility billing, also a very busy year. We did, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were able to implement our mobile service orders, which allowed us to move service requests from our utility billing desk out to our guys that are in the field. And so there was a lot less of the having to come into City Hall interaction happening, and also a lot more of that electronic piece, so they weren't having to waste time coming to and from City Hall to get service orders as they occurred. We worked on updating our water and sewer regulations, which both came to you and were approved. We did an audit of all of our trash accounts with waste management. We did obviously have some impacts from the pandemic, and we did work with 40 payment arrangements for customers that needed extended time to pay due to the impact financially of the pandemic. Also 21 pledges for assistance by outside agencies. Some of our statistics I think are fun when we get into some of these processing positions. We do average about 1,500 monthly online payments. We had 700 service actions, 300 connections for service, 135 disconnections of service, and 190 occupant changes. And every time you have any one of those things happening, there is a touch to that account by both our utility billing staff, but also our utility staff that are out in the field. So it's impacting, and they work very closely together. Our focus for this next year is to work on the campaign for the Roundup donation that we put in place right at the end of this last year and rolled out at the beginning of this year. Automating some notifications to our customers. Mostly, and to this end, we are really wanting to do a hands-on approach to reducing the number of monthly service shutoffs. And we have the capability in our system to do an automated calling system to our customers that might be on the shutoff list. And so oftentimes we will start a month with, maybe 100 shutoffs. By the time you get to the day of actual shutoffs, we may have 40. We'd like to make sure that we're reducing that number. If we can get a reminder phone call out to those customers without physically having to pick up the phone and call each of them. So we are working on that. We do have the base ready to go and hoping to roll that out in the next month or two. We do want to work on our recycling education, and then also implementing more of an automated service application and disconnection form, whereas right now you do have to come in, show your physical documents and sign and have your driver's license available in person. And we're working on a way that we can more automate that so that they don't have to come into the City Hall to do so. For accounting and financial reporting, this would include everything that's financial reporting, accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll processing, and project management. We did update and train all of our city staff on purchasing card policy and the manual. We've streamlined our liability balancing. We have implemented employee self-service, which is the opportunity for our employees to enter their time from anywhere, whether it's at home, whether it is from the office or in the field. They can update their time so that payroll can be processed on time and they don't have to come in and sit down at a computer to do that. We did a lot of research and making recommendations on the FFCRA new regulations that came out at the beginning of COVID and related to that and all the way through the end of this last year. Some of our statistics for the accounting area was we managed 500 active vendors. We processed 2,450 accounts payable payments. We processed 70 1099s. We processed 32 manual accounts receivable invoices and 69 W-2s. In a normal year, that would be a lot higher than that, but we didn't have the seasonal staff this year since the aquatic center was closed. In 2021, we're looking to develop an invoice import process, which would help to reduce the manual entry for our accounts payable entry team. We want to, while we already produce financial reports at the end of the year, they're audited and produced, we really want to provide a more comprehensive, it's called a CAFR, or comprehensive annual financial reporting. There's some other sections to that have to be developed, and we're working towards putting a good draft of that together. We need to implement our fixed asset module, which we have and are moving towards collecting that data, and then assist in implementing court online payments. Another area is finance and benefit district administration. I put these two together. They really are probably separate functions, but they do require financing for the benefit district, so I put them all together under finance. We did maintain the city's AA- bond rating this year, or last year. We developed delinquency reporting for special assessments. We managed 2,645 benefit district accounts. We issued $6.2 million in general obligation bonds, which saved us approximately $945,000 in interest through advanced refunding. We issued $3.1 million in temporary notes. We issued a 2020 lease purchase. And we did enhance our debt reporting for distribution on our website and to the city council. What we're looking to do in this next year is to streamline the debt issuance process and to find a way to import the assessment payments from both counties into our existing software so that we can do more delinquency analysis, whereas right now, those are two separate systems. There isn't an easy way to do that, so we're going to work with them and see if there's a way we can't import that so we have that more regularly and not have to rely on them for that reporting. Budget is another area that we focus on. This last year, we did our first 2-year budget, and it was a success. We added to our normal process a department head presentation of their own budget requests. When we had a concentrated effort on the public participation in the budget process, and we actually put that into our process before the pandemic hit. And so we had to find a way to make that work for everyone else. We had 8 public budget sessions. They were either in person or via Zoom. We offered an online citizen request form for capital improvements and a dedicated email address for public budget questions. For this next year, we have a little bit of cleanup work to do because of the impact from the pandemic. So we will be revisiting with you the 2021 budget and then also potentially revising the 2022 budget and then also certifying the 2022 budget. Making some streamlining adjustments so that we can be prepared for our upcoming 2-year budget that would be happening starting the process next year, and then also preparing our 2022 through 2026 capital improvement program. That was all the data that I had for you, but I just want to make sure that while I'm not mentioning them by name, they know who they are. These staff members work really hard to grasp a good understanding of not just what they have in front of them, but they're also working really hard to cross-train. Being a small staff, it's really tough to be able to keep internal controls in place and not cross some of those functions, but to also be able to support each other. And truthfully, out of the 5 admin staff that we have, 3 of them have been here about 9 months, maybe 10 now. So they have really had to dig in and do their jobs well, and they did it during a really rough time. And they're really functioning well, doing a great job. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand that they, I really do appreciate the work that they're doing. Do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
I do.
You do, okay.
You talked about the community center starting to reopen in the upcoming year. I've had several people from the community come to me and say, well, Olathe is open. Why isn't ours open? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, in fact, we just talked about this, I want to say last week or the week before, and Johnson County overall has extended their directives as far as the COVID pandemic go, and so we had decided that we would extend with them. They extend those restrictions or regulations through the end of March, and so we decided that we would move in that same direction, but also come back and reanalyze it at March 1. And I think that you'll see that overall that the county as a whole is starting to decline in overall cases, and the percentages are starting to go down, which is why you're seeing more schools open up. So there's a possibility that we may be able to reopen and or phase into that sooner than that. But for the time being, we're just trying to follow those Johnson County regulations.
Okay, that doesn't answer my question.
Okay.
Olathe is open. Their community center is open. Why isn't ours? I mean, tons of people come to me at that situation and say, I don't know. but let me see what I can glean.
Sure. I'm not prepared to have that discussion tonight, but we can certainly come back to you and have that discussion with the council so that we can talk more about that in depth. Would that be,
I think the citizens will
Okay.
appreciate that. I do.
Sounds good.
sure, okay, I think we could probably add that to the next meeting if that would be okay? Okay, sure.
Maybe the better question is why does Olathe have it open and what enables them to have it open?
I think
Rather
that's a
than-
solution, yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
And that be the reasons
some
why on that end instead. So,
Sure,
do
we
have
can
a
do that. We have some research, I just don't have all of that with me, so but we can certainly gather that and bring it back to you.
real quick, have you sent out the budget meeting schedule yet? Did I miss that?
No, I did not send that out. I was waiting on one more thing. But I can tell you, I should be able to send that out by tomorrow, maybe at the very top of this next week. We will start out with our very first, key components and, budget information session on February 25th.
And the
So
reason,
it'll be at the next meeting.
I do a lot of travel, and so I'd like to see what I can do to get it on my schedule as much as possible.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. We will get that out to you as soon as we can.
And then you and I had talked about mobile levy, information about the different things about it. Have you made any progress on that?
Yes, and I do intend to have that in this discussion on the 25th. So to talk about key components of the budget, but also general information about mill levy and comparisons and how it's calculated and how that impacts our city overall.
Right, and the comparisons of communities, percentage of city versus school district versus county, just to give us a frame of reference where we sit specifically.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes, any questions?
Nope, no question.
All right. Mr. Graves?
Did have one question with the Wi-Fi program. Is that utilized frequently, or what would you say as far as?
It's not utilized often, but when it's needed, I think they're very thankful that it's available to them. And we've had a variety of reasons why they've needed to come in. Either they had an outage at home or simply just couldn't work at their home. For a variety of reasons. Some households have a lot of people working online at one time. Sometimes it's too loud. Sometimes they need to take a test. And so we've had a variety of reasons why they've come into. Some have been here for multiple days in a row, some just one time. I wouldn't say, it sounds like by explaining that there's a lot and that it's being used frequently, but I do think it's great that we have it open when it is needed for them.
Great, and you see that continuing?
I do,
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. That is all I have.
Thank you very much.
Anything else? Thank you.
Can I get a motion for the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second,
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
That brings us to our first formal. And that's Ms. Landis.
All right, thank you. So I may just start with a little bit of background on this item first, and then I also have with us available on the line Tyler Ellsworth from Kutak Rock and Ben Hart from Baker Tilly. The 2019A general obligation temporary notes were sold in February of 2019, supporting the design and construction of the Dayton Creek 3 Special Benefit District. And the temporary notes come due and payable on March 1 of 2021, and it was determined that there was an inadequate amount of time to complete the assessment process prior to that date. As a result, a bidding process to extend the temporary notes was managed by Baker Tilly, the city's financial advisor, for a private sale of temporary notes, providing for a one-year extension to the project. And the resolution to be considered will authorize the issuance and delivery of the renewal temporary notes. An extension of those temporary notes will place the first year of special assessments on the 2022 tax roll. That is what I have placed in the agenda review. However, we have had a discussion on whether or not it would be possible to long-term finance this project prior to the assessment roll for 2021. and if that would save interest on the project and how we might go about that. So I want to make sure that you understand that that may not be the case. We may actually long-term finance this before the end of the year and make sure that those are on the tax roll for this year so that it does follow our normal process, but there would be probably more on that to come to as we entered into that assessment process. Do Tyler and Ben, would either one of you like to jump in here and talk about the process for the temporary notes?
Yeah, I can. Melanie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, so what Melanie said, we issued RFP on January 26th. We sent the RFP out to 9 different banks. There were a range of regional, national, and local banks. We received 5 responses back, and within our recommendation letter to you guys, those included Commerce Bank, First Option Bank, Century Bank, US Bank, and UMB Bank. The interest rates range from 0.52% up to 2.75%. Our recommendation ends up being obviously the lowest interest rate that US Bank offered at 0.25% interest rate. They also included $2,500 bank counsel fee, which has been confirmed or committed to by the bank itself. Overall, the rates that came in, especially the ones from US Bank and UMB Bank, are under what we're seeing in the competitive market, just in the auctions that we typically see in temporary notes. This is a very successful private RFP that went out. What I was glad to do is have this offered to the local banks as well, so they could we can see what their offer might be. So with that, our recommendation is to go ahead and award to US Bank at 0.52%.
What is the resolution number?
The resolution number is 2021-R-04. And I might just add that this afternoon, we did send out information to you regarding the covenants that were included in the note purchase agreement. So I don't know whether you had time to review that or not, but if you have questions, we can certainly answer that. And the revised or the red line version of the resolution and the note purchase agreement were in front of you on the dais this evening.
The 1,629,000.
Yes.
No changes from that. I move to approve resolution number 2021-R-04 for the amount of $1,629,000.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Be 5-0.
Thank you very much.
The next one is Mr. Hendershot.
Good evening. The item before you this evening that I will talk about is a bid acceptance for utility locating services. For many years, the city has contracted utility locating services with Integrity Locating Services. That current contract, along with any ability to extend that contract, has expired. So as a result of that, we issued an RFP for utility locating services and received 2 bids from USIC Locating as well as Integrity Locating Services. The bid tabulations were attached to your agenda review. As you can see, Integrity Services did provide, or has provided, not as you can see, I can inform you, let me back up here, that Integrity has provided very reliable on-time services for several years. And their bid tabulations, the bid tabulation shows that Integrity was the lower in the bids in all categories in that RFP. Those categories included per ticket, emergency request after hours, project locating by the hour, per updated ticket, and then locates exceeding 1 hour that are billed in 15-minute increments. And you can see in the information that was provided to you in the packet that Integrity by far was the lower bid on all of those items. Acceptance of these bids in the RFP is the first step in this process, and once the bids are accepted, staff will proceed with contract negotiations as directed by the City Council. Alternatives for you this evening include accepting the bids for utility locating service and direct staff to proceed with contract negotiations with Integrity Locating, or in the alternate, accept the bids and direct staff to contract negotiations with USIC. We can reject all the bids submitted with the RFP for utility services or table this item for further direction. Mr. Jenkins was involved in a review of this RFP for utility locating services, and we do have a draft contract already established for submission to, as a result of the action tonight. It is staff's recommendation that council accepts the bids from Integrity Locating Services LLC and USIC Locating Services LLC for RFP number PW-20-002 and direct staff to proceed with contract negotiations with Integrity Locating Services. With that, I would answer any questions you may have.
Mrs. Hughes, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Mr. Graves, anything?
If I may, Council President, there was a memo that went out in the packet as well, and just to give you an idea of the amount of activity that we see in the city of Spring Hill related to utility locates. In 2015, there was 1,389. In 2018, there was 4,188. That was due primarily, that's when the railroad expanded from one track to two, and there were just hundreds of utility locates coming in as a result of that. You'll see that in 2019, it did take a dip, but we were still at 3,627, and then last year, 3,814. That's primarily due to all of the development that we're seeing around the city, various projects. I assure you, with all of the broadband and conduit work that's going on, our numbers have skyrocketed for this first month of this year, but it's very exciting to see. But it is a considerable amount of work that we contract out.
Sounds very good. Good motion.
Yeah. Move to accept the bid for the utility locating services with Integrity Locating Services LLC according to the, let me back up here, the RFP number PW-20-2-002.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
500.
I would anticipate a contract at the next meeting then.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That brings us to items on the discussion list. Mr. Jenkins.
Mr. President, may I defer to the city clerk? with
Yes, you can.
The primary presentation.
Thank you.
So this is a follow-up from our January 14th meeting that we had. So what I have here, oh, I'm sorry, there we go. This is the comparables for the copy fees. What they list are the fees that the Kansas Attorney General charges, State of Kansas, the City of Olathe, Shawnee, Lenexa, and Gardner. And then it does list what the Spring Hill current charge is, and then what staff is proposing for the costs. And then for the court information, the comparables were from Johnson County District Court, the Kansas Judicial Branch. And and we show also what is current and what we're proposing. And I would like to mention, there is a footnote for the Kansas Attorney General that they allow one record request in a 12-month period that can be provided with less than 1 hour of staff time, or which is less than 25 pages, will be provided at no charge. For requests exceeding 1 hour of staff time, or that are more than 25 pages, the following rates shall apply. The additional fees, including any other costs incurred by the agency in connection with complying with the record request, may be assessed to the requester. The state of Kansas, their record request, that can be provided with less than 1 hour of staff time or fewer than 100 pages will be provided to residents of the state of Kansas at no charge. For requests that exceed that amount, the rates apply. And for the electronic format record for the state of Kansas, record custodian will be the sole judge of the ability of the agency to comply with any record requests for the records to be provided in electronic format or for records that must be produced in any special computer-generated format. The city of Shawnee, they do have late fees. Unless otherwise noted, a late fee of 5% per month added to all fees listed in the comprehensive use fee schedule. And I would like to make a note, if, depending on what direction the city council wants to go with electronic copies, because currently there is no fee for those, but we do have a processing fee if somebody uses a credit card. So I would probably recommend that if somebody wanted to use a credit card, if we go with an electronic fee, that would be assessed along with the, I'm assuming that would probably be best, right, Finance Director? If they use a credit card for electronic copies, that they would be assessed a processing fee, because that is part of our program. And then the next slide shows the staff time comparables. The Kansas Attorney General, they have their clerical, their IT, and their attorney. It's an assistant AG and then a deputy AG. And then for other classifications of employees, their charge is based upon actual costs. The state of Kansas are the same, except for the attorney. They do charge $60 an hour for the attorney. Olathe, actual cost of the employee rate of pay. Shawnee and Lenexa and Gardner's, there's listed as well. Lenexa's is the actual staff hourly time, including wages and fringe benefits. And depending on, and I'll just continue reading it, just be easier. For Lenexa, this fee applies to staff time using for searching, compiling, reviewing, redacting, sorting, providing access to, and/or copying of records or data. This fee may be charges in any situation where greater than 15 minutes of staff time is incurred while responding to a requester for information. And then Gardner, their request is $30 an hour for staff time in 15-minute increments after the first 15 minutes. And then if they have to retrieve boxes from their archives, it will be billed at cost. And then our current rate for Spring Hill is $30 per hour per employee for research time, in contingent upon personnel being available for the record research. And we're proposing for clerical, $18 an hour, for IT services staff, $38 an hour, and then for staff or attorney time would be $60 an hour. And if there were any other classifications of employees that would be needed for this search of records, the charge would be based upon actual costs. For court information, the comparables came from Johnson County District Court. They have a $12 per hour staff research. The Kansas Judicial Branch has different increments depending on what employee it is. So 20 hours in quarter-hour increments for record custodians and clerical employees, $60 per hour in quarter-hour increments for professional employees. If an official record custodian determines help from a third party is needed to respond to a records request, such as a request that requires reviewing or producing electronic records, the third party's charges for that help may be imposed. Spring Hill currently is $30 per hour, same as above. We would be suggesting $18, $38.60 for the attorney, and then charge based on actual costs. And then the next slide is basically a follow-up from the information that was requested from the January 14th City Council meeting. So I have this listed, basically boiled down to what the requests were. Altogether, we had 54 core requests in 2020. There were 7 of those requests that were the same request. And that one was provided electronically. And since there is no charge currently for electronic copies, it was given at no charge, and it was less than an hour of staff time. So there was no charge to those requesters for staff time. The next one is, we had 3 repeat requests for the same, what I mean by that, these 3 people requested the same record. And then out of the 3, 2 canceled their request. And the information was provided electronically at no charge. For the record, however, there was 2 hours of staff time involved at $30 an hour, which totaled $60. The next one, where there were 2 requests of the same document, one was canceled. We did provide it electronically, and it was no charge. However, there was staff time at $30 an hour for 1.5 hours, for a total of $45. Then we get to, let's see, there were 3, these are just 3 requests that were provided electronically, and it involves staff time, but there was no charge for the actual copies that were sent electronically. So that took 5.5 hours, actually out of the 3 requests, total 5.5 hours, which totals 165 there. We had 2 requests that were actually paper copies. Our paper copy charge is 25 cents per page, and total for those both requests was $1.25, and they were able to be found within less than an hour of staff time. And then 27 requests were basically just the other general requests were provided electronically. There was no charge for the copies, and there was no charge for the staff time, as less than an hour. 9 requests were either denied or there was no record that existed, and so then there was no charge for those. We did have 1 request that canceled their request, and so then there was no charges there. The 2020 attorney fees, and this includes for all the departments, so if there was any help that police department needed, or administration, or public works, planning, basically just all of the city departments, that included, and that total amount for 2020, the city incurred $36,254.30 of attorney fees for records requests that were beyond, it needed a little bit more research than just the regular
Retainer.
thank you, the retainer that we normally would have used. It needed a little bit more research with the city attorney's help and maybe outside help with an attorney. So that's the amount for that. And then really the next 2 slides are just the same as what we were proposing at the last meeting, as far as what our fees are being proposed, just for consideration, to, put it out there to see if you want any changes, but it's just what we came up with, so I really don't have any other changes to what was presented to the proposed fees. So, with that, if you have questions.
I have a couple for you. Does the attorney review all core requests?
When I do get a core request, I will contact Frank, but if it's just a simple, where I need to make sure that it falls under, or if there are so many reasons why a record couldn't be open, and I just want to confirm that I would not release a record that would, fall into that category where it shouldn't have been released. And those have normally been under his container, to where It's a simple question, and we both just have a simple conversation,
Okay.
and then I'm able to reply. So yes,
I would assume there's some of them out here, if somebody wants a copy of a policy or something, it's a pretty simple one to,
sure. Like if something actually is already on the website, like for instance, an ordinance, or that they want a tape of the meeting, or, it could just be anything. But if it's something very simple, or even like a copy of a contract.
right.
And go right to the contract file, scan it, send it off, and
Okay.
I'm done, so.
I guess I still would like the idea of us to make it as simple and easy as possible for the citizens. I look at, they're paying all our wages here already. But I know there's some time, so I think I would like to see, I know there's concern about a large file, somebody's requesting something like the RFP documents. That's a lot of paperwork, and I understand there should be some fees with that, but I guess some of the simple things I'm looking at, can we just find a way to do it and not worry about charging a citizen? If somebody, a non-citizen wants that same document, do a charge.
I
Ms. He-
agree with Councilmember Owen. I think that we should, really lean towards transparency and ease of use for citizens. If it's less than an hour, like the Attorney General, if it's less than an hour and it is electronic and we don't have to seek outside resources, let's just send it. Stop charging people for that kind of stuff. I don't think we do now, but less than an hour of our time, already electronic, maybe even up to 20 pages. I really think it's important that our citizens get the documents that our city produces on their behalf.
And I know you did talk about something last meeting, it came up about putting core requests on our city website.
And that would be up to you.
I did.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I think Mrs. Hughes did, and I think you brought up a good point there, was some people might be concerned that their name's gonna be put on the website. Even though they are available through a core request, you can get them, but it also, thinking about it, is in some cases, I think the state does it, and Mr. Jenkins, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, that when you request a core request, you're agreeing to certain stipulations on that request, are you not? Is it just the state doing that, where you can't use that information for profit,
Correct.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Does that fall under us too?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just was thinking, and being the devil's advocate here, is if somebody puts in a core request, gets their information, they agree not to do that, we turn around and put that information on the city's webpage, what would prevent somebody else from profiting on that information? I don't know if it's a problem or not, I'm just thinking there's, the one person requested has to agree you're not going to profit from this information. If we make it public information, does that change the rule?
It's an excellent issue. I really don't have a response to that. I don't know whether the entities that are putting it on their websites have any means to cause that person who makes that request through the internet has to agree to certain
Right.
stipulations. I know, sometimes you get on the internet and you have to agree to certain conditions by getting it, but to be consistent with the state law, they'd have to have some means to adhere to that statute. So you bring up an excellent point.
That would just concern me, because one person's agreeing to the statute, but everybody else isn't. Okay, if it becomes public knowledge and somebody's making a profit on it, okay, who's to say the first person didn't do it, not do it?
But my question
We
would
can
be,
simply put on top of the core request page, we can make a page on the website that's to view all core requests, but to enter, you have to hit the accept button.
Okay, to make it where they're agreeing to that same stipulation, okay,
Exactly. And all they have to do is hit an accept button.
okay.
I do think that the request itself should not be added to the website. I don't think that the page that you fill out and put your name and address on to make the request needs to be made public. That goes against the openness and transparency. It makes citizens think twice about making a request that they about the documents that are theirs, that we produced for them, that we did as a job for them. And I don't think we should do that to citizens.
Oh, I agree with you on that. Mr. Lee, did you have something?
Well, back to what you were, if I understood correctly, you were referring back to what the state attorney
Right.
general office does.
Yes. And I guess
And-
we are under that same rule, correct?
Right.
Right.
My question is, when you look at with what they're doing on the website with the state attorney general, are they only listing the individual and what the request is, or are they providing the documents too?
I wasn't actually talking about the website for the Attorney General. I was referring to, and to make sure we were understood, that when you.
I'm just trying to understand what you were really
Yeah,
asking.
if you're a person filling out a request for a court request, you're stipulating that you're not gonna use the information you're getting from the city to make a profit, right? If we put that information on the website now, to help if anybody else wants it, is there an issue, and I think Mrs. Hughes came up with a solution for it, that the other people looking on the website are getting that same information, but there may not be any reason or any way for them to say, I agree not to use the same terminology or the same restrictions.
And if I could just interject, there would be, I would have to work with the IT department before this, we would even be ready to put it on the website, because I would want, I don't know what that thing is called, where it says if are you a robot or whatever,
Yes.
and then it knows where that actual request came from, because we would need that tracking
Right,
in case
okay.
we needed to know who that was. So, I mean, yeah, it wouldn't happen
Instantaneously.
overnight, and so I don't even know what that would really take. It was just a thought. Actually, where I saw it was the city of Shawnee, and the way they do it is they have the list, but not all of the records are actually posted on their
Okay.
website. It depends on what record it was. If it's just a generalized record, they'll put it out there, but if it's more of a sensitive type record or with names or something, they won't put that out there. You would actually have to make a core request
To
with
get it, okay.
that entity. So, really, that's, would be my concern too,
Okay.
is that we would want to know if somebody was going out there and wanting a record that was on our website, through Cora, we would want to know who's requesting that. So there would be some tracking in case something did come from that.
Did I make it clear here? You still,
No, I understand that.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think through about what I would kind of envision for the whole process.
yeah. That sounds like that's something we're not even gonna have to worry about right now anyway. We can wait and deal with that at a later date.
I do have a couple questions. We talked about not charging a fee. Ms. Hughes mentioned like just no fee. I would suggest maybe we put some sort of stipulation on that, just so it's like if they want, 60 color copies, that's gonna get pretty pricey after.
And I think you're right. I think there's probably a point where they're requesting so much information that, okay, you gotta pay something.
Right, and I think I'm
I want us to
okay
be
with
as
no
cheap as
charge.
possible, so that we're not trying to gouge anybody. So.
I'd agree with that, and I think
I
getting,
meant the Attorney General's rules. I liked what the Attorney General was saying, and the cap is that if it takes more than an hour, we charge a fee. If it's more than 25 pages, we charge a fee. If it's not just black and white pages, we charge a fee. If, things like that. But electronic copies that take less than an hour, that would be, free to the person. The
And that's what we
Attorney
do
General does it in a 12-month period too. If you're a multiple requester, if you're one of those people who just has to have, the such and such every month, the Attorney General would charge you after the first time. They would charge you the second month, the third month, the fourth month. Maybe we could do it every quarter instead of year. I mean, we're not serving the whole state.
No.
We're serving our little community. We're not going to be overrun. We had 57 requests last year. Some of them were larger than others, but a majority of them were single person requests who requested one time. And I think that maybe every quarter somebody gets their free request.
That may be something to look at, yes.
The only other, well, one other question I had was looking at this. So citizen A makes a request for, puts in the core request, and they pay, I mean, whatever the staff time is, so like $160. Is that correct? For example, just to throw.
Well, if it's less than an hour, haven't been charging.
Okay.
Because right now, our fee is $30 per hour.
Okay.
And so, and as you can see, we were able to process most of the core requests under an hour because they were pretty simple. It was just the ones that needed a little bit more time to review or whatever their case was. So yeah, it would, if it was over an hour, then yes. And if there are any fees, and if I should let you know that if there are any fees that are going to be involved with staff time, we reach out to the requester and give them an estimate. And we do our best guess with the estimate of what the charges we foresee should be, or that will be, by depending on how many records there were and how long it's going to take staff to combine them. Because if they, for instance, if they want emails, then I have to go to the IT department. The IT department has to look at whatever the request is. And depending on what that request is, if they're just saying, I want this request from this date to this date with no other criteria, like a subject to where you could, break down that size. So you do try to work with the requester to try and help them. It's like, that may be 900 documents. And so then that would be an astronomical amount of
Right.
staff time. So you do try to help that requester, what they're, it's not that we're just trying to help them. We want to give them what they want in Cora records, because that's what we're here for. It's part of my responsibility. And so we just, try and work with them so it isn't expensive. But when you have that many records that you would have to go through, you give them an estimate.
Right.
And so then it's up to them, and they'll say, yes, go ahead and process that. Depending on what that amount is, there's an option that they have to prepay, because you don't want to process all of this and then they change their mind, and then your time wasn't paid for. So you can ask them to prepay. If your time was less, then they would get a refund. But if it starts getting more, if you spend more time on that request, then you would reach out to them again and say, hey, I'm at, 10 hours working on this. I see another 12, 13 hours I'm going to need, or, additional. So it's just really working with the requester, but we do let them know what the estimated fees are going to be before we kind of start that records request. So
looking at 2020, we collected $270 in fees for core requests that year.
yes, and that was just staff time. And then, of course, the paper copy's $1.25, so.
Okay.
But yeah, as far as staff time, that was all the staff time as far as what we collected.
And the only this is my big concern is that, to your point, that's part of your responsibility is to do that. I'm totally good with that. That's what the taxpayers pay for. But the concern I have is the $36,254. We don't recoup that from the requester, correct?
No, the way our ordinance is written now is that it's $30 per employee. And our city attorney is technically not an attorney. An employee. Yes, you are an attorney. We're in trouble if you're not an attorney. Our attorney is not an employee. He's a contractor.
Okay.
So, and appointed as our city attorney. So,
But there's a retainer in there.
and if it's a normal request, like if I call them and we're just making sure if let's say I have to deny something, I want to make sure that I am looking at the right denial reason, and so I need his opinion to make sure that we are correct on our core
But
request.
that's not really part of the 36,000 at this number, is it?
No, that 36,000, I think there were just some odd things that happened in 2020 where there was more research required for our city attorney, and there might have been some outside attorneys as well looking at some core requests that we needed assistance with.
Because I think that's where my big concern is. So the taxpayers paying for that $36,000 plus in core requests. Correct.
Yes, yeah, that's coming out of the general fund, right, Miss? Okay.
Okay. And then do you have any idea, just because you said, I think you used the number last time, like a 39% increase from 2019?
I believe so, if that's what my, yeah.
Do you know what those attorney fees were in 2019?
Actually, I did a quick review, and I believe that nothing popped up, so those requests fell under his retainer.
Okay.
So there were no outside there was no outside time that he needed that was astronomical, that where he needed to really spend some time looking at that request. And it fell under his retainer, because that's, part of what our city attorney does for us, so.
So 2020 is kind of an outlier for cost for the attorney.
I'm sorry, 2020?
2020 would be kind of an outlier for us.
Yeah, I was surprised, and so, a better comparison will probably be, next, in 2021, this year, to see what, comes up, but you just never know, until you get that records request.
And I'm on the same boat. Like, I don't want to discourage anyone from ever trying to get that, but I don't know how we protect the taxpayer just in that sense of that big fee. Like, that number is a big number, so I think 2022 will be a good, or 2021 will be a good test of, is that what we're going to keep going down this path? Do
Sure.
we need to change what we
Yeah.
do? But hopefully, it was just a part of 2020, all the fun it all was. Okay, great. That's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it would be beneficial to see, we're reporting 54 core requests for 2020. What did Gardner process, Lenexa? I mean, I know their
Well,
populations are bigger, but what kind of core requests did they have to fulfill? So
I don't know that.
that
I
gives us
could
an idea.
look
If
into
we saw
that
an increase
and look at, and get that back to you for sure. But I didn't ask, I just went more for fees, because that's what we're proposing, it's just more about revising our fees. I didn't compare to what our records requests
Yeah,
were.
and echo the others, some others, I certainly don't see a need to make it burdensome for someone to get access to information, so.
And we do have one citizen, Roy Ruffle, would like to comment.
Sure.
Have him come up.
Let
You have a question first? Sorry? Hang on a
Yeah.
second.
Oh,
So, I just wanted to clarify, at this time, we are not charging if it's less than an hour, correct?
we're not charging if it's less than an hour.
So it's not a
Because
change in
it's-
policy. With what
Our
we're doing.
policy is already written out. It's like, our policy is employees, is $30 per hour and so if it's less than an hour, I don't feel like I can charge an hour, because,
Correct.
you
So
know,
we're
it's-
not changing that, it'd just be the hourly rate that we would be changing depending on who the staff time is involved.
correct.
So the actual cost could reduce for an individual based on the request if it's more than an hour, but right now, we're not charging anything.
Right, that, the page where it talks about inspection fees, you can see that the Spring Hill Current, we charge 25 cents for a black and white copy. And photo, we don't have anything written for color, so if they wanted color, I would have to follow what our black and white copy amount is.
I get the copy fees, but I just wanted to stay on that hourly rate.
Sure, and well, and then the next page shows what the staff, right now, it's those $30 an hour, to where what is proposed is more broken down of what employee would be working with that record. So if I needed a clerical person that could handle it, it'd be $18 per hour. IT would be $38 per hour, and then attorney's time would be $60 per hour if I needed to get any of these. It's just broken down a little bit more than just $30 an hour, because I do feel like that's,
How do you,
A lot.
and this is hypothetical, but like if you have multiple departments involved, do you just kind of average it out? Would that be your guess?
Well, when a record comes into me, if they want a finance record, then I reach out to the finance department and say, hey, I've got a records request. Let me know if you have it. I need to know within 3 days so I can respond back. And there's some rules I have to do that. I have to respond to these people in 3 days. And the police department, if you want a record from the police department, you have to contact them directly. I don't deal with the police records. That is strictly all those. And so I don't even have those stats for what the police department deals with. This is just what comes in through the city clerk administration, and then whatever department that record falls into, I reach out to them and work with that staff member, and then I reach back out to the requester to kind of keep in touch and contact, and if the record's available, if it's not, and so on, so.
And to what Ms. Hughes was saying, she was like, well, if we just allow one person, one per quarter free, but with what I'm seeing here is that really at this point, with what we're seeing with our policy is, we're pretty much making it so that as long as it's a reasonably small one, less than an hour or whatever, they can do one per month as it is. So to offer one free per quarter or one per month, with, as long as it's a small, quick hit, for the most part, in less than an hour, they could ask that monthly or weekly, as long as it's a quick hit and not cost them anything. So I don't know if I need to state that we need to have one free per, because at first when I heard the state attorney general stuff saying one free one, but then seeing that we're pretty much outside of the court fee, the attorney ones, we had $270 only on these limited amounts, which told me that I don't know if we really need to go the route and sit there and offer one for free. You know, I think that we're pretty reasonable with that. So as long as we're keeping it at that, I think we're okay.
I think the important thing here is to keep it simple. I get that flavor from you.
Yeah, because my concern is all of a sudden we get it confusing for us, it's gonna be confusing for them.
That's right.
And that's where I, to ask somebody of why they got charged something or not something, and we have papers upon papers from them to sort through, we're just asking for problems, for people to get frustrated. So, a little bit of the KISS method is what I would like to kind of see it be.
I think that's best serves the community and the constituents. Keep it simple.
Yeah, because if it's complex for us, and we look at it a lot, think about what they're gonna be seeing, so.
Yep, and that isn't transparent when you put those barriers up like that, in my opinion.
It's not intended to be, but it can come,
It could be.
it could
Yeah,
be
so
felt
we need
from
to
the
be
person.
conscious of
Yes.
that. Absolutely.
Mr. Whipple?
On the core part, I found it intriguing since I have done a few core requests with the city. And so I just wanted to make some of the comments. One question though I had, though, from seeing the charges, so is it currently now, if it's electronic copy, let's say it's 30 pages, that is free. It's already a PDF, it's already something there, that is 30 page, and it's 30 pages, that's free. But we're proposing 25 cents for something that's already a PDF?
It's for the pages, it's just to match what the paper copies were, because it is an actual copy is what the intent was.
Okay.
But it's just a record, and I was just trying to propose, because the comparable jurisdictions, a lot of them will also charge for the electronic, so it's just a proposal, suggestion.
Sure. I guess my only comment on that is if it's already a PDF, to me, I don't see the cost in it. And so if it's something that's readily available, it's a drop file, hit attachment or whatever, to me, I don't see the point in charging for that. There was just three things that I just wanted to touch on just with my history with core requests. And one is the timeliness. And I realize, and this is not aimed at one person or anything at all, because I realize there's several people that are mixed in to try to get this information. But on average, we do go to the full extent of the law where it's 3 days where you get your reply. And usually it's not an answer, that it's usually we're still looking. They're waiting on other departments or what have you. But out of the 4 that I did in 2020, it took an average of 15 days to get the information that I needed. And the most I was charged was $45. If you look at the fees and you see then how many hours was put into it, but yet it takes 15 days to get it, that's my concern, is the timeliness of getting those. Here recently, and one was an email. I mean, one of you guys had mentioned an email in a council meeting, and I had asked for that one, and that one took 13 days to search for those emails and get that email, and I paid $45 for that. And here recently with the school district, I requested some emails, heck of a lot more emails. And it was, everything was provided to me and given to me within 3 business days. And so when I was shocked and blown away by that. Whereas with the city, it took 13 days just on that one. And so to me, just one of the points I wanted to point out is the timeless. And I think a lot of that might just be even other people involved in the matter might not necessarily understand the promptness of the core request.
To clarify one question, Ms. Garrity, is it 3 days to, I guess, acknowledge or is it 3 days to complete it?
It's 3 days to acknowledge.
To acknowledge.
You have to reply to him.
Okay.
Or to the requester.
And it's unlimited. You can sit there and keep going 3 days. There's no law that says after 30 days you have to give the answer. It's just 3 days you have to follow up, correct?
3 days I have to acknowledge your, and we do our best to try and give that document if it's accessible and easily accessible. Sure. 3 days is, I definitely have 3 days to reach out to the requester.
Okay. I just want to make sure it wasn't supposed to be done in 3 days and it took 15 days for something.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not indicated here. We'd have to do a core request for me to get a look at it. But the point is that some of your requests might have required attorney time. And that might be the reason why it took the period of time of up to 15 days to get that done. So
Sure. Yeah, and that's understandable.
I don't know if it was or not.
Right.
But
Well, and that actually goes into my next point was, I'm glad, one of you had asked if the attorney does review every core request. Because there's some of them, our city, I can't remember which year it was, we paid like over $500,000 in attorney fees. We've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so when I see the 36, I was like, well, actually, that's a real small, small part of it. But anyways, I sometimes wonder if if they're being reviewed when they don't need to be reviewed. But it sounds like she already had answered that. But the last one was, I agree with a lot of the words that were echoed by Andrea and Steve, in that I think when you start to charge for some things that don't need to be charged for, you're really making your citizens pay for transparency. And to me, that's one thing I think we need to really focus on, is make sure that the core request, if it's that 1 hour, I really liked it. I thought that was great. Now, I disagree with the electronic copy part. I think that's kind of crazy. If it's already there, I don't understand why you're paying for it when it's all already electronic. But anyway, that was just what I wanted to add when I shared on it.
I think I do agree with the electronic copies. If it's simple, just
Yeah.
email it as like, let's just email it and not worry about it.
I just want to make, it's not like multiple emails or multiple all at one, because then that gets a little dicey. But I agree, if it's one file,
Yeah.
whatever, have a send and go. And I think that's the hard part to kind of, level of effort. Is it just right there, readily available to you, just click and go? And I think we do charge nothing for that, correct? So I think I think the thing we have to protect ourselves on is if it starts to get into multiple, do we have something in process to protect that time, which it sounds like we do as well. And totally irrelevant to the thing, but the Lenexa one was interesting to me, that they charge for black and white copies, but they don't charge for color copies, or I don't know if they charge
Maybe
flat
they don't
across,
produce
but
color copy.
I mean, they don't own a
Yeah.
color copier, maybe.
yeah, I don't know, but that was
Who knows?
really weird to me.
So, the thing I'd like to kind of dig in about is to look at what we can do to preclude having these, attorney fees in the amount of, what was the 36,254.30. What I like to kind of know is when we're getting hit with that and when we're starting to, I'm just trying to think through the process of what we can do. Because what we don't want to have happen, and we've probably had this happen, not just last year, but other previous years, where we incurred a lot of attorney fees for specific things where we were outside the retainer.
Right.
So,
And we also had outside counsel on a couple of those too.
right, and I'm just trying to get ourselves kind of set up to prevent us from incurring these costs, because it's gonna, we have had years in past where we got hit with something, and it's not just this here, but when you get into certain things with like litigation, whatever, that just comes out of the general fund, and then we're trying to figure out how to make that up. And that's where I'm just trying to protect ourselves from in the future. And then that begs the question, okay, what is the scope in the retainer? Why are we falling outside of the retainer? Are there certain things that we might want to change the fee in the retainer to cover those? So overall, it might be a little bit more of a general overhead number by so much, but there is a limit into how much we get hit with that cost. So
I'm sorry, I'll let you finish.
that's the kind of thing I'd like to know is of the that's $36,000, if there were certain repeated topics that were required for research in there, maybe we could add that or change the scope of the retainer so that we don't have to worry about this enormous ballooning cost.
If I can just add, with that 36,000 in attorney fees, there were two very large, and I'm just gonna have to do this by memory because I don't have that, but there was one that was about $12,000 for one topic, and we had like, I think it was for a certain topic, and that was about $12,000. We had another case that it was probably close to $11,000. So that was really just two records requests that were about half, or about 2/3 of that, because the general ones that were probably just need a little bit more, I mean, what listed multiple was only like about $11,000. So I could almost estimate that if we didn't have those two large events that happened, we could probably be more likely at an $11,000 attorney fee for records that were outside of our normal monthly, I keep losing that word. Retainer, thank you. Oh, boy. So that's what, I am concerned, with that, but I do want to share that two records requests were about 2/3 of that amount.
But if the city attorney had been an employee, then that wouldn't have been an outside cost. It would have gone into the overhead necessarily, depending upon, well, it just depends on how it would fall, because if they're an employee at that point, then there would have been a set charge that he would have been charging that could have been charged back to the.
Right, and we would have given them an estimate.
My question is if it becomes exorbitant for the research that is being done for the request, then maybe we need to change the verbiage of that. It doesn't matter whether you're an employee or a non-employee.
Well, you do need to, what I need to do is send you the policy, which does list that what is giving the requester an estimate of the fees, even before we start the process of that records request. If we know that it would take 3 or 4 hours for the city attorney to review the information, and then if something is within that, then it needs to be redacted, and there's just some time coming. So we do try to estimate what the fees are before we just start jumping in and say, okay, by the way, your records request with staff time is now, $500.
You don't estimate that attorney fee, right?
But
So-
right now,
so-
I can't estimate, yeah, because I don't estimate what the attorney's fee can be, because I can't charge for that.
And that's where I'm saying this is maybe we need to change with what the statement says in the policy, that it doesn't have to be, it's not just employee, it's pure staff time, or whatever you want to say, employee, non-employee.
Well, I believe the Attorney General is pretty clear on being able to charge for attorney fees. Correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, there's that case where there was a city that had a pretty astronomical amount for attorney's fees, and it was filed with the Attorney General. When they were when they thought that they were charging too much for an attorney's. And I don't know if they had the attorney's fees listed in their fee schedule.
Mr. President, may I?
Yes.
That was a case called City of Frontenac.
Yes.
Where they charged for attorney fees, I think it was $4,000 for a particular core request, and the Attorney General said they could not charge for those fees because their fee resolution, did not talk about attorney fees. And then the second issue in that case was the AG has concluded that governmental entities can charge for attorney fees, but they have to be reasonable attorney fees. And right now, there's a question about what is reasonable, but what we're utilizing here is what other jurisdictions are charging, which is run between $30 to $60 an hour for that fee. Using that as an intent, what is the legislative intent of CORA? And they didn't want to stifle requests, so they've capped the attorney fees for that reasonable fees, which is about between 30 to 60,000. Excuse me, 30 to 60 dollars an hour.
Okay, wow.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
And that's what my proposal is modeling the Kansas Attorney General and the state of Kansas. That is what I'm using those clerical, or those staff fees as per proposal for if there was additional staff time, and then including an attorney fee to where if we did have to have attorneys look at the records, and it would be outside of an hour, then those
But
fees
I
would.
think to Chris's point, you still in that scenario wouldn't recoup the 36,000 right? Because it would be one of your employees. Or no?
For the staff, for the attorney?
Uh-huh.
No, it would still be our city attorney looking
Oh, okay.
at that. We would still use an attorney
Okay,
if we had a category for an attorney fee,
gotcha.
and it wouldn't be our employee. So it was just more categorizing what staff times are. And so the attorney it's its own classification, just so we would have those actually listed, because right now I can't.
So the only thing I would request is that because the attorney fees were high, just to make sure that the current verbiage in the contract, maybe revisit that and make sure that we don't need to revisit in the attorney contract for the retainer. May not need to change in scope slightly to potentially just hedge our risk on that. But then also, it sounds like that the $60 per hour is a reasonable per hour fee based off of what is said. So I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure that it's at the right spot for what we're charging.
It was 30 to 60. 60 was the upper end.
No, for attorney, it's straight 60.
Here, he's looking at these numbers here.
I'm looking at
What
looking
she's
here.
proposing.
I'm talking about right here, Mr. Actor.
Yeah, the last 2 pages are the copy fees that staff is proposing, and the staff time. All the items that are in red, on this slide that is up there right now.
The good thing about having a fee in there for the attorney for the time is that we won't necessarily recoup all of our costs, but it does make it so that somebody's not just using our city attorney for their own research pet project instead of having to go out and get an attorney for when they should actually be doing that for their own research for what they want to do. So,
Yeah.
So just to recap, I can bring, as far as the fees, so you're okay with the 20, do you want to go down the fees list to kind of have a consensus here, so I know exactly what my direction will be, to know what to propose?
I think that's a good idea,
Okay,
just to clean it up.
Real quick for my notes,
sounds good.
make sure.
no, I thought he had a question on this topic.
I'll check it, did he? Mr. Boswell, did you have a,
Yeah, I just wanted to, maybe got confused in the whole conversation I was listening to. So when somebody makes a core request, are we gonna make a database so we have those available so that people make the same request, so we're not just throwing more money away to the attorneys or to the staff people, that it's unnecessary to do so, so we have like and they can sign in and do their agreements and everything, and then they can have access to those, all of those, already?
you're talking about having it online?
Yes.
I think we're still discussing that, because there's some other options we have to look at in requirements, so it's being discussed, but not gonna happen now.
Yeah, and the other question was, so the attorney's fees range from 30 to 60 from the AG, right? Is that
Yes.
what you take in?
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking the maximum for attorney's fees?
That's what's proposed.
The Kansas Attorney General is for an assistant attorney general for $35, and then a deputy attorney general for $50. But the state of Kansas is their attorney, and I felt that our city attorney falls under the attorney classification versus a deputy or an assistant. So that was the thinking on,
Way to look into an assistant or deputy or something of the sort.
They're still an attorney.
I was just curious, just trying to minimize the cost to the individuals applying for requests.
Then that would mean we'd probably have to hire us one,
Yeah.
which would cost more money.
Not necessarily, what we're
Yeah.
doing is setting fees.
Yes.
But
okay. So if,
Mr. Boswell was asking though is I think where I think we stand right now is that we will not be posting somebody else's Cora online.
correct,
But what will happen is if one Cora request comes through, and then somebody else has another unique Cora request of the same nature of that, not really unique, but the same Cora request of the same information, that information can just be sent to them and packaged out.
sure, I can just
just
pull it
means that
from that. Yeah, if it's the same request, then I can just pull it from that,
It'll be a
and,
different request, right?
yeah, it would fall as a different request, but if that
But you're pulling
request
the
has already been, then I can just go to that
Then it should be
Cora
an hour
Right.
and be able to get it right to them. So whoever, yeah,
That's why I was saying it's still its own unique request by the individual, but it's still the same, but it's the information that was
Yeah,
previously
I'm following you.
requested. But
We
it
won't
won't
go
be
the
posted.
attorney with the same stuff and charge them whatever that attorney, like, that.
Oh,
that's,
let's not go there.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's, I
But,
just process as they come in, so
Yeah.
okay,
It
so,
won't be posted online.
no, okay, so I get that. We're not gonna post online, and that's perfectly fine. That was just.
Sure we're clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I can get your attention to the fees that we are proposing. And I just want to point out the inspection fee in A. Right now, if somebody wanted to come in and inspect a record, a staff member does have to sit with that person to make sure that the record doesn't get damaged or just to keep the integrity of the original record. So we are requesting that the staff member that does have to sit there with the person who is looking at these documents, they would be charged staff time. Right now, we don't have any language in there, and so this red writing in here does allow us for them to pay the actual cost of the employee rate of pay. And that would, and they also do say, try to use the employee with the least amount of pay, so you're not putting somewhere there at a high level, a higher level of pay. Because basically just kind of sitting there with the person looking through the documents. And honestly, we just maybe had I don't get very many of those, but that is an option. People can come in and inspect instead of actually asking for a copy because, you know, maybe they want to look at what they are actually wanting before they actually put their request in for a copy.
I guess I'm not sure I particularly like is I've done some of those and know people that have done that. And pretty much they hand them the book, here's the book, see you later, call us when you're done. Is they're really not getting the original of anything, they're getting copies of a document. And so there's nothing, if they destroy, if they take a page out of it, it's like, okay, they're taking a page out of a copy, we still have the original.
Right, but you
And most
wouldn't
of them,
know
they're
if
taking
that
pictures of
record
whatever they
was
wanna take.
missing from the copy.
Right.
So you really need to sit there with the records and, you know, even if it is a copy original, it's a record, no matter what. And you have to keep the integrity of the records. So I feel that a person would have to sit there with the requester if they want to come in and sit down and look at a file to make sure that that's not.
Because there's a potential that if it, even it's a copy, let's say for what you were saying, you give it to them, then they look through it and they tear a page out. But then they don't pay anything, but there's also no record that they took the record
Right,
from.
you don't have any record
city.
of that.
So that's the reason why to have somebody sit with them is unfortunately we live in a world where there's a lot of honest people, but unfortunately there are some also dishonest people that,
And we live in a world where there's cameras everywhere.
well, if we could do that and demonstrate that, then, but then there's also, you know, they mark, I don't know.
I know what you're saying, but I've been in a place where they said, here it is, you take pictures, you do whatever you want, knowing don't destroy the record, and nobody was there with you, so there was no fee to be charged.
Okay, so moving on to the copies. So the 25-cent black and white, we're okay with that, correct? And then what about the color copies? Proposing to change that to 50 cents, but it's up, I'm just a yay or nay,
Nay,
or,
I think just leave it at 25%.
yep, remain the same.
okay, so we'll do 25 for color. And the electronic copies,
None,
No
zero.
charge.
consensus?
I think we just need to make sure we have some sort of limit on those. This would be my only,
So a maximum, I mean, we could do a maximum of, I mean, just a suggestion, a maximum of, I think somebody was saying 25 pages. If it's less than 25 pages, it's no charge, and
Right.
then if it's above 25 pages,
and that's. where-
sometimes you would have to take a document though and scan it in, and then it becomes electronic. Not all of it is PDF. It just really depends on, but when I mean electronically, everything is getting sent to them by email now. It's changed so much that records, people are not coming in to pick up paper copies anymore.
Right.
What I mean by electronically, they're being emailed. We possibly would have had to scan it in or redact it, and so there is, you know, some items. So it was just, but it's up to you of how you.
I think we should encourage that for sure, and I think by not charging that, you encourage that.
Yes.
But I do think you've got to set some sort of, I don't know, like what if.
A number.
Maybe something along the
So-
lines of.
Well, it's the time, isn't it? Don't you think it's the time that you're putting into it that's really the valuable part of our staff? Like, if it's over an hour, then it's that $30. Isn't that recouping that cost?
That's where I was kind of going, is that electronic copies, yeah, with what Ms. Hughes was saying is just because you get an electronic copy doesn't mean that you're not going to incur staff time. So I think what they need to understand is when they request an electronic copy, that doesn't mean that it's free. What it means is that you need to understand with an asterisk, if this takes more than an hour, you'll be incurred the cost of the staff time, just like a paper request.
And I understand the staff time, but right now, so I'm just wanting to clarify if there's a charge for an electronic page going out.
I don't think there's a reason for the electronic, for the
Okay,
actual
so we can
copy, there's
do-
the staff time, but we might want to put an asterisk on it.
Yes,
What's the difference between electronic copies per page and scanning per page? I agree, if it's physical, you have to scan it, that should be paid for. I mean, someone.
Right.
it's already digital,
Yes.
to me, I'm thinking, I don't care if it's 1,000 pages, if it's already digital, what's the cost incurred of that person putting it in?
I think now we're discussing, they're trying to say if it takes 2 hours or for 3 hours, for whatever reason, to put all that 1,000 pages in an email, there might be a cost there is what they're talking.
Yeah, and maybe you do something like, again, maybe it's not the number of pages, but we clarify that it's not just no charge. If it's 3 hours, then there would be some sort of charge.
Then your staff time kicks in.
That's what I was saying.
So
Yeah.
what,
Asterisk and say staff time,
Okay, yeah.
electronic no cost, but could incur staff time if it's in excess of.
That makes
Because
sense.
it's-
Yeah.
and what I, how about if I
It's
suggest
standard.
this?
It's
is-
staff time, whether you scan it, whether you photocopy, I mean,
Right.
it's just staff time, more than an hour. And people need to understand that if it's more than an hour for, whether it's an electronic copy or whatever it is, you're going to be paying for that staff time.
Okay, so I am removing the electronic copy per page.
Okay.
Okay, and then what I can do is maybe keep track of how many pages it is throughout for 2021, and maybe we can have something to base it off of then,
Yeah.
instead of just electronic copies. And so maybe if we want to, we can relook at it, and if it's, nothing really, that matters as far as the amount of how many pages are in the electronic copy. Because if it is scanning, then that does come into play.
Right.
And I am requesting that go from 180 down to 65 cents
Okay.
per scan, if that's okay with that. Now, we do have a large format printer in our community development department. And it does do black and white, and it does color copies. So for the black and white, right now, there's nothing listed in our fee schedule. So I'm proposing $10 for a black and white copy and $15 for a color copy. And that would be a large, we're talking big maps.
Okay.
So if you're okay with the
36.
10 and the 15?
Has that come across in a core request recently?
No, but I would like to have it in here if it does, because then I can't,
Okay.
I would have to charge them 25 cents for a paper copy.
Okay.
What I would say is just take a look and make sure whether we're not exceeding with what a commercial company would, like Kelly Blueprint, where they would charge for a large format of a 30 by 42 or something like that. That we're not charging $10 and Kelly format would charge $5. So we might just look and say.
I'll double check,
Yeah.
I'll double check those with outside.
But they are expensive. I
Companies.
used to have
Sure.
a large format printer like that.
Well, and then just the cost of the ink and the paper, it's a very expensive printer to have, so. Let's see, facsimile transmission per page. Oh, I see. If we were going to fax a page out, that would be 65 cents per page if we're gonna be using our fax machine.
Again, I
Do I
think we could derive that cost from what the private sector does, like Kinko's and things of that nature.
Okay,
FedEx, they do-
sure, I can double check
Fax miles,
outside
yes.
commercial, sure.
Let's see.
And then the mailing, if somebody needed something mailed, it would just be the cost of the mailing. And if it was paper copies, also, the paper copies would come into play in that. Or if it was a disc, or a flash drive, something along those lines. So the municipal court, for certification of documents, it'd be $1 per document.
Okay.
I'm gonna struggle with this one.
Authentication.
Thank you. I always put the accent wrong. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm looking for $2 per document on that one. It takes a little bit more than just making a copy. Our court clerk has to, and those fall within what the other jurisdictions do for Johnson County District Court and the judicial branch. So for the Spring Hill Police Department, the only change that they are requesting is to lower their accident reports to $10 and the photo disc and DVD would be $25 per disc or DVD.
Okay.
And then the fingerprinting, they're wanting to change it to $25 per 2 cards per person, instead of just, I believe, 1 card, right, Chief? Is that how that works? And then staff time. So for clerical, so basically the $30 an hour would go away. I'm proposing $18 an hour for clerical time. Do you have consensus on that? Don't like? Yay, nay?
Sounds okay.
I'd like to keep that the same, $30 an hour, and then break out the attorney's fees.
Do you want everybody else to be the same and then just attorney fees will change?
Put the attorney's fees, let's split the difference and go at $40.
Wait now, so are you saying just an employee cost is a flat $30?
Employee, clerical, and IT all at $30.
$30.
Then the attorney, we bump up to $40.
Attorney bump up to 40 and not the 60?
Because there's nothing there now, so he wants to, instead of 60, it'd be 40.
Right now, it's all 30. I'm just saying, keep the, my opinion.
Is it all 30 right now, or is it?
The attorney's nothing.
Attorney,
Nothing.
nothing.
There's attorney, there's
An
no,
increase no matter what we do.
I think it's an increase for the attorney no matter what. I think 60 is reasonable though for an attorney. I mean, with what we're paying on our cost, I mean, we're not anywhere recouping in our cost even at $60 per.
We're not, but keep in mind that we're trying to not prevent people from making Quora requests.
And I get
So we want
that.
to be welcoming to that.
And
Don't want to be transparent as possible.
but at the same time, I get that. We also don't want people using our city attorney for personal endeavors where they would actually otherwise have to go get an attorney at a way higher rate and using us, and then the taxpayers are paying the difference of the 60 versus the hourly fee of what we're paying our city attorney. So there's a balance there. I don't think that zero of what they're paying now is reasonable. I don't think the full attorney cost of what we're talking about with what we pay him per hour is reasonable either. But I don't think 60 is excessive. I could go with your flat cost on all the other employees at 30 and just keep it 30 and 60.
I'm good with
The attorney, on the attorney fees, the attorney is going to review records. Is that what he's doing? He's gonna make a legal,
It's not going to make an illegal opinion.
you're just
On Quora
saying, yes,
request.
they can have this record or not have this record.
No, the attorney has to go through a lot of records and redact the parts that aren't allowed by Quora. Quora is not just yes or no, you can have a record. It's oftentimes, yes, you're always allowed to have a record, but this part you can't.
Right.
So it's maybe
Right.
part of a 30-page document, and they have to go through each page and check it.
But the attorney's not giving any legal advice or things of that nature. They're just reviewing the documents and striking what needs to be stricken.
But they could also be doing, Ms. Hughes, they could also be doing research though on the topic if we don't have the information gathered, correct?
it would only
Right.
be,
A lot of times when
records.
it comes to Quora requests, the Quora says you can have this except for you can't have this information. Well, then that's further defined by the Attorney General in opinions. So maybe our attorney has to go look up all of these opinions regarding this police report or whatever it is and find out exactly what part of the page is allowed to be seen.
So he's not making a legal judgment, I think.
It's not making a legal judgment, but there is a lot of
That is
research
a
time.
legal judgment because every time Quora is defined by so many different things that there's statutes, there's attorney general opinions, all of these things. Anytime an attorney has to go research that and then mark a document, whether they're telling you they're marking a document or not, that's the legal opinion. They've decided the law says this part of the page is not allowable.
So, Ms. Hughes, do you think $60 an hour for attorney time is reasonable or not?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think, what do you say?
60.
And I'm okay with 60, so I think that at that point, we would probably go with 60.
Go ahead, Mr. Roswell.
Is this something that a paralegal could do?
Probably not.
Hughes would know that, Mr. Hughes would.
Mr. President, may I comment?
Yes.
Frank Jenkins, City Attorney. The core request, as you pointed out and by Councilman Hughes pointed out, has to be reviewed to determine what under Quora has to be produced. And there's several exemptions, attorney-client privilege communications, personnel matters. And therefore, you do have to render a legal opinion as to what should or should not be released under CORA. And then as to who would do it, sometimes a paralegal could assist in that endeavor. That's between the attorney and the paralegal, dividing up those disciplines. So, yes, a paralegal may be able to do it. It just depends upon the subject matter.
Okay.
What about Mr. Eckert had talked about just saying a flat fee of 30 for employees?
I'm okay with
I'm,
that.
I'm okay. It just ends up being more expensive for the taxpayers, but
I'm thinking.
Or, yeah.
Keep the numbers in like that, we're gonna keep 60.
Well, and there wasn't too many requests that required, let's see, there were 5 requests that actually fell into the $30 per hour staff time. So there's quite a few where we're able to process them less than an hour.
Yeah, so 30,
So-
sounds.
so 30, 60, keep it simple.
How many of those fell in inside the IT?
I combined these by a spreadsheet. I don't have that number right now. You're asking how many of these involved?
You have it split out, in the proposed, it's split out to $18 for clerical. and
Sure.
38 for IT.
Yes, so if I get a request that somebody wants emails, the only person that I can go to is the IT department. And then they have to go in there and put the parameters in the system to know how many records would pop up of emails with their request. I mean, you could have 100 emails pop up, and so then he would tell me, hey, I've got 100 records, but I'd have no idea how many pages those emails are. So I just pulled that from what, I think it was the staff time. The Attorney General, state, and basically I modeled our staff time after the Attorney General and the state of Kansas. But we can keep it at 30. I mean, it just makes it simpler to do the math
That's what I was
when we're
wondering.
trying to figure it all out.
Just for simplicity, just keep it at
Sure.
30.
And then consensus is start the attorney at $60. And then, we can reevaluate this at the end of the year after 2021, just to see how much that kicks in. Because if it's just a regular, normal request, it's gonna continue to be under his, retainer.
Yeah.
Why am I?
Which we're
I need a
asking also.
retainer, it sounds like.
And we're also
Sorry.
requesting to have that potentially reviewed too. So, and there's nothing to say 6 months down the road, we set it at 60, we can't come back and reset it.
Sure,
In fact, it
yeah,
might
it's
be
just something to
nice
start with.
Have you come back in 6 months with somewhat of a report of what we're doing, how we're doing with the core report.
Absolutely, because, right now I have nothing.
Yeah.
And so it was just something to start with and to bring to your attention that I can't recoup any attorney fees
Okay.
by the way it's written right now.
And I don't know if you did or not, the inspection fees of having somebody sit there with them. How many other cities do that and what do they charge? Do we know?
That I don't know if they had an inspection fee. So I could reach out.
Yeah, could you reach out and
To
give us
that.
an idea on that one?
I think if they really sit there, then that's fair, but if it's to your point where they leave the room, I mean,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous.
I mean, you could actually put them in by your office in the conference table right there and
Sure.
you're still working your thing, but if you hear a big rip, what do they do? You know?
I mean, I think what we would like to do is just see what people,
Calling chief.
what I'd like to see is what people currently are doing, for best practice in that.
Yeah.
What is the best practice that is occurring with that?
Inspection.
Yeah, the inspection. Mr.
would
Owen
be-
says he's seen it this way,
Yeah.
we've seen it this way. What is the current standard, best practice on that?
For if someone wanting to come in to look
And
at
just
it.
And
review the
review.
document. Let's go after best practice. Let's not go after,
Consensus or anything.
consensus or with Mr.
Yeah.
Owen. Let's go with best practice. With what is the best practice in the public,
In the
arena,
surrounding areas.
Yeah.
right? What is, and it's not just surrounding areas, but I mean, let's just do a quick search. you know, surrounding. And
What the
find
best
out
practice, if
best
somebody
practices.
wants to
Yeah.
come in and inspect
What they
a
do, what they require.
document, what their process is.
Yes.
If
Sure.
we just look in our surrounding area, we might find that there's no good
Yeah.
best practice. Let's look at best practice. You know,
Sometimes no practice is best practice though, too, so.
I wouldn't go
Okay.
that far. No practice is best practice.
goodness.
Is not what I would say in the
Well,
engineering world.
Well, no, but when you're pinpointing something like this, I constantly have in my mind, a person coming in from the community doing a core request, how simple do we make it for them? You know, we're not trying to hide anything, transparency is a huge issue. So that's in the front of my mind right now, thinking, how easy can this be made?
I think that's the best.
Don't
thing
wanna
for us
overthink
do.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right, yeah, and
The
right
only
now,
thing
the
I'd say is
process,
You wanna protect that taxpayer dollars, and that 36,000, again, 1 year, but, I mean, we gotta be mindful of that too. But again, to your
Still-
point, like, I don't think we need to charge nickel and dime every single day, make it
Yeah.
as simple as possible.
Yeah.
But protect the taxpayer.
But, you know, $36,000 in 1 year is, what is that? How much of a mill is that $36,000, Ms. Landers? Almost over half a mil?
Just under.
Frank, that,
and like I said, that was an odd,
yeah, that was.
I think there were
Yeah.
a couple of,
I get that, but it's
you
still.
know, odd
Almost
items
half a
out there
mil.
that
Yeah.
But yeah,
made it be that
Yeah,
high.
I would think pro bono is a good word in my vocabulary.
I really do appreciate
Sure.
you listening to my presentation. I know it was a lot.
Well, thank you for all the
And-
hard work.
Yeah, you're welcome,
Appreciate it.
and I will go back over my notes and present it like in a draft form, so we can kind of finalize it before, you know, it goes into
Should
final. So I do
make-
appreciate it.
Make a request on that. This is that before we get to the, you know, the next council meeting and you submit all that to us, if you could just kind of put together what your summary of the notes were and then have that provided to us for our review to make sure that we're understanding that. We're not getting it on the week of the council package.
Makes sense?
Well, yeah, and I will probably ask that if it can go on, skip this next meeting and go on to the second meeting in March.
I don't see
Yeah.
a problem with it at all.
Second meeting in
think
March,
it's
we'll have it.
Is this time? Gives-
Yeah, and I will do my best to get it out to you before the day of the meeting. I do apologize for my lateness on that.
And I don't think there's a need to rush this through or anything.
No.
Yeah, exactly. This is just
But I-
a good discussion and
I want the
bring it to your
document of
attention.
summarizing what we talked about
Yeah.
sent
Yeah.
out sooner than later because I don't want us to forget what we said.
Yeah.
Especially since each one of us had 32 opinions, times the five of us, I
We're all
think.
different.
That's just a good discussion.
So,
Yeah,
Okay.
great. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I guess the next one is item 8, discussion ordinance, and that is going to be Mr. Jenkins. And Mr. Hendershot, I guess Mr. Jenkins.
Mr. President, members of the City Council, this relates to proposed amendments to Chapter 2 of the Spring Hill Municipal Code, which pertains to animals and fowl. This matter came before you previously when the governing body elected to eliminate the tax on dog license taxes. At that time, Chief Hansen and I had occasion to review the rest of the chapter and determined that there were several sections that needed to be updated. The municipal code has several chapters, as you know, and this happened to be one of them that needs updating. Secondly, I'd say that Chief Hansen has spent a tremendous amount of time in going through that chapter, been very valuable to me and with her assistance, and I wanted to thank her for that. At this point, what I'd like to stress is that these proposed changes are recommended based upon specific reasons, and they're just strictly consideration for your discussion tonight. So I'll go through the ones in general, those that are substantive in nature, because the chapter is about 15 pages long, many of which are changes that are matter of form, and therefore I'm just going to summarize the key ones for you at this time. The first one is one that was section 2-101. And as I say, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, and then you can comment afterwards if you want to do it that way. Section 2-101 is one that right now is we have a public nuisance provision, but it only applies to basically disturbing the peace. If you have an animal that's disturbing the peace. The proposed change is to expand that to include noise specifically, odors of animals, and also animals that would destroy personal property, which would be either public or private property. The next item is one that has come before you several months ago by individuals who are requesting you consider the raising of chickens within the community. And that is something that the chief has looked at various other jurisdictions, and what you have before you in this proposed ordinance is just a draft. It's just something for you to consider, and it lists out approximately, I'd say, 10 items that other jurisdictions have added to their particular chicken ordinance, if that's what you wanted to even consider. I'll save time. I'm not going to go through the various factors unless you want me to. It talks about the size of the property, talks about the nature of the hen house, if you will, talks about how far it is from a dwelling. Very general statements, but those are things that are for your consideration if you decide as a governing body to even permit chickens to be within the city. The next one, and I'm skipping over this, but the next one is dealing with cats. In reviewing your code, it does not address cats with respect to how many cats could be permitted in a dwelling or in the city for an individual, and so the recommendation would be for you to consider limiting the number of cats to the same number as dogs. And that would be limited to 2 right now. You have a special permit procedure where you can request that to increase it to 3. And the next question would be, suggestion would be at 3, whether it be cats and dogs individually or a blending of the family, if you will. The next item is dealing with a redemption fee when the officers have to have someone come in to redeem a particular animal. There's a fee in the code book that's right now is being used for $20, and the recommendation is that that be set by the governing body by resolution. That's consistent with your practice of having your fees established by a resolution. At that time, you can consider what that would remain to be $20. The next item is with respect to animal bite procedures. And this is something that the chief had mentioned, that there's one section right now that has the animal control officer to be appointed by the city administrator or police chief, and then that has to be ratified or through the consent of the governing body. The recommendation would be to authorize the chief himself, not the administrator, to appoint the animal control officer, treating that person like an employee rather than have to go through the governing body process. The next item would be also under the animal bite procedure. There is not a section specifically talking about what a person should or should not be able to do with respect, or what responsibility they'd have with respect to an animal bite. Section 2-301 is suggested to be added. It says persons who are responsible for and in control of animals in the city shall prevent such animals from inflicting animal bites on any person or domestic animal. It shall be a violation of this section by the person responsible for and in control of an animal if the animal, when unprovoked, inflicts an animal bite on any person or domestic animal. The purpose of this is that if the prosecutor wants to cite somebody, he can cite that specific section. You can argue that it's also blended throughout the code, but you want something specific that makes prosecution a lot easier. The next item would be with respect to an area which the chief, as I say, at a point, she may want to comment about this, but in reviewing the code, has determined that the police officer or animal control officer doesn't have clear direction on when the animal is dangerous, if it's vicious, what should be done with it, and what should be the determination. This is a real important section, in my opinion, that what would be done is that it would have the officer, animal control, whether it be a law enforcement officer, to be able to go to municipal court, submit a petition, and ask the court to conduct a hearing for the municipal court to make a determination as to what would be the classification of that particular animal. And we've added a definition section which defines dangerous animals, a vicious animal, or a potential dangerous animal. Depending upon what the court determines, that determines what sanctions can be imposed with respect to that dog. If the dog is determined to be vicious, and there's a definition, that's the worst case scenario, where maybe it's killed someone, killed other animals, the court would have the authority to impose that the animal be euthanized, or require the animal to be removed from the jurisdiction of the city. The other two categories, there's other variations of what the court could direct. But this way, the officer, animal control, law enforcement officer, could go to court and be able to have a clear direction as to what his authority would be, rather than make it purely a judgment call on his part. The other section that relates to that is the person has the right, after a year of the court's decision, to come in and ask for a review of that designation. The next section deals with animal cruelty. The proposed amendment there would be to provide that the officer could charge the costs and fees against the animal owner relating to the costs incurred by the animal control officer or law enforcement officer in seizing, carrying, treating, impounding, and confining or human killing of the animal. So that's more of a financial issue right now. We don't have a clear direction as to how we can recover those costs. The next section is section 2-704. We have a section that deals with tethering and some general statements of what you can't do with respect to tethering. This one specifies that it prohibits tethering for more than 3 continuous hours and cannot restrict movement, and must have adequate care, food, shelter, and water. Again, if you go to court, you have some clear standards that you can rely upon in the prosecution of the person who's abusing the animal. The last item is electronic fences and electronic collars, section 2-706. This section relates to electronic devices upon residential property, wearing a collar or required devices. It states that the electronic fences cannot be closer than 10 feet from public sidewalk or street, requires the posting of the premises so that someone who's walking by will know that there's a electrified fence. That's a quick summary of the suggested changes, and I stress these are just recommendations and concepts, but I wanted to bring it to your attention. The recommendation would be for you to review the code sections and then maybe bring it to your attention or bring it to a vote on what you want to do or not want to do.
Do have some questions.
Sure, go ahead.
So, on chickens, of course I'm gonna have questions on chickens. Where did the 2 acres minimum come from?
At this point, Mr. Layton, could we defer to the chief on that point?
To your point, Mr. Layton, a lot of these were best practices, and I looked at several different cities, Prairie Village, Gardner, Shawnee, Olathe, and looked at what they had. I believe the 2 acres was taken from Gardner.
Okay. One of the concerns I have with just not just chickens, but any like animals that out there is a water quality runoff issue. So if you get a lot of rains, say like you have a 2-acre property in the city limits, it's abutting up to a subdivision where it's dense and property and it's got 3 lots right next to it. It's downstream. It sounds crazy, but none of your things have happened in my 15 years, city council, where water quality issues have now ran downstream. And what I don't want to have is somebody complaining that they have chicken feces running downstream into their property, and why did the city allow that? Or be whatever it is, whatever, for instance, whatever type of animal. I think we need to talk about something about that type of an issue, because if people don't clean up the feces of these animals or other things that they might create, we could be potentially having a water quality issue or stormwater or something like that. I'm concerned about that.
So you're thinking of having a
I think
requirement
that
in here
we
to
could-
cleaning? Go ahead, Ms. Hughes.
I was just going to say that if you turn it into a license, you can revoke it at any time. And licenses can have requirements of, cleanliness and such and such. If you turn the chicken situation into a request for a chicken license, then they have to sign an agreement saying that they will do these things, otherwise their license will be revoked and the chickens have to be removed within so many days and such has to be cleaned up. Then you have a situation where, you're holding people to a standard, and otherwise you're removing that from them.
What about putting it in a permit process instead?
It is. So it is under the,
Section E.
it is under Section 1, which requires permits. Permits are required for chickens under the following conditions, as well as the Vietnamese pot-bellied pigs. You can tie that into your permits, as Ms. Hughes mentioned. Permits can be revoked or denied if you're not meeting those standards. The ordinance that we had suggested regarding public nuisance, noise, and odor is a combination of what was taken from the special permit section about nuisance and odor and the cleanliness and sanitation of the area where the animals live, along with the noise and nuisance, and just kind of combining it all in one. So that would be a violation in which they could then have their permit revoked. And of course, there'd be a due process allowing them to appeal it to the courts and et cetera. So we do have that in there. And also, as you, Mr. Jenkins mentioned, this is as a result. This is merely a suggestion. We are not advocating one way or the other. The group of students that had come forward asking for us to look at the chickens and what that would look like. We had representatives from community development and the police department get together with the students to look and compare what options were there. We took that information and compiled it into these recommendations of what might work here if we wanted to entertain that option. But we are not advocating one way or the other that we add chickens. Just merely giving you some light.
Mr. Jenkins? Sorry.
Yes, ma'am?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a permit versus a license. A permit places more burden on the city to take it away than a license does. A license is more flexible for the city to revoke. Is that correct?
Councilman Hughes, I believe that it's just the opposite. I mean, there is as you point out, there's a big distinction between a permit versus a license. My recollection, I've researched this before, is that a permit has less legal rights attached to it than a license. But in any event, we can characterize it one way or the other,
Okay.
but if it's depending on which one we choose, but I believe the permit is less vesting of any rights as opposed to a license. So we could, when you,
Okay,
when you
that's what I was
issue
looking for.
something, you could
I just want to
tie,
make sure the city has the best position.
I'm sorry?
I just wanted to make sure that we were picking the best position for the city.
I
So
believe,
if a permit is, that's great.
yeah, and I believe it is, the way it's characterized now as a permit is, gives the licensee less rights, and it's easier to take those rights away than if it was a license. But in any event, we can get that straightened out, no matter what,
Okay.
depending on what you do.
Can we go to the next one from the 2 acres passing up 10 adult chickens? Down in item C, enclosed structures in exercise area shall be located a minimum of 200 feet from a residential structure. What does that mean when we compare it to 30 feet from any neighboring dwelling? What do we mean by that? Because that could mean different things. I don't want any ambiguities, I guess is what I'm saying. We've run into that before where we have ambiguities on these things, and they say, well, that's not my residential structure, that's my dwelling. And you're like, yeah, you don't live in that. We know you live over there. Come on, give me a break.
I can give you what my opinion is of that, but maybe the chief's got a better perspective.
That is language taken from other city
Right.
ordinances.
My interpretation would be, but that's not to mean that it shouldn't be clarified further, but you link it to 200 feet from a residential structure, meaning the structure that the hen house, or whatever you want to call it, is. So proximity to that person living there. The second test of 30 feet from the neighboring dwellings would be creating a nuisance for them. Now, I agree with you. When I read that, it seems to be inconsistent, but if you look at the language tying it to dwelling, if someone's living on the property, they can't have the house or the chicken coop, close to that house dwelling. Consequently, the 30 feet can't be from a neighboring dwelling. I think it's a good point that you raise. It needs to be clarified.
Whose neighboring dwelling? That's what I meant. That's where I think what would be good is maybe if we need to provide like a definitions section of some of these things, like what is or make sure that it refers to what we have defined in other parts of our municipal code.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a question. Do we want chickens?
Well, that's putting, that is the issue.
Yeah.
Okay, before we go down that road, that's a good question.
Do we even want the chickens?
All right,
But
well,
to Mr. Leeton's point, I mean, if you just change the verbiage to say 200 feet from your property line inward, that would get it away from the neighbor 200 feet, then you wouldn't have a question about what's a dwelling, what's not a dwelling.
but
Or 100 feet or whatever you determine to be. That cleans it up a little bit, as opposed to saying what's a structure, what's not a structure.
but
You just end the boundary from that. So
to
we're
Mr.
getting,
Owen's question,
yeah.
do we really want, okay, because when I was first on council, we had way more loose requirements and regulations on this. And we had numerous issues from anywhere from like allowing the potbelly pigs, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but to people with horses on property that were saying that they could have a horse on a residential lot, if I remember correctly, to other things. And so we've tightened it up. The question is how far do we want to really loosen this back up? Because we're talking, a city is mainly put together for the purpose of density. So
You're alleviating that by saying 2 acres or more.
And that's true. The 2 acre
Change
point
it.
does give us some leeway.
And you also change it on the zoning where it has to be AG or RR. So I mean, that, you're moving away from the inner city neighborhooding type of things.
I was going with the flow on this. He's the one that asked the question.
I just brought it up,
So-
because I know it's been discussed. And
I mean, in generally, I don't necessarily support it, but if we're going to go the route of allowing it, then I think we need to be very specific with what we're doing. Because that's where we have gotten in trouble before is, we said, we will allow something because the governing body had good intentions, and it just flew back in our face, and we were then trying to figure out how are we gonna handle the situation, because what will always happen in these situations is, we have good intentions, and then somebody comes in and says, I'm gonna see how far I can take it. And so then they interpret with what the terms enter in here, and if they're not clear, then they manipulate it. Now we're trying to figure out, can we revoke or not revoke, whether it's a permit or a license, and all that. And now we're going down this whole road, and it's like, do we really wanna go there? So,
do it.
Tall fences
I
make
mean,
good
the 2
neighbors.
acres is not a bad number for us.
I mean, I grew up on 5 acres, and we had fenced off around 2 acres, and depending on how that lot is configured, it's conceivable that you could have a chicken coop. So, what I would like to know, Chief, out of curiosity with this, is we used to have a K-State Agricultural Extension representative, I can't remember his name, and see if we could send it off to them for comment. Like, the agriculture extension, they have like an agricultural department. And they deal with chickens all the time, they deal with all these things.
It's the extension office, which is what 4-H.
In
goes
Olathe.
through. In Olathe, yeah.
Right, and have them kind of review it and say, yeah, 2 acres is good, or, well, for 10 chickens, that really should be 2.5 acres. You know, that's I'm throwing that, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
either.
know
I'm
if you get 0.25 acres per chicken, I have no idea.
I was pretty proud of myself, I knew coop. So.
I mean, but I've seen problems where you have 2 horses on about 2 acres, and can cause a problem, you know, so, just because of how things can work with them, so.
So do we want to pursue the chicken?
I'm not necessarily against it if it's more in an ag setting and we can restrict it to that. I'm not for chickens where.
In a residential neighborhood.
That makes no sense.
No.
I mean, that's why people moved into a city is because they didn't want to live with chicken next to them, in my opinion. So.
I think the 2 acres covers it. I mean, I think that.
That may be, but it may be a point to have it reviewed.
I think we just have it reviewed for a best practice type thing.
Okay.
There's some really good stuff that was done here, and I
Yeah.
think there's some really good work, but I think there might be something out there that,
Okay.
let's just,
Yeah,
The K-State Extension Office is an excellent resource.
that's,
for those types of.
they come back and they can tell you about what type of grass to grow for your soil that we have.
Yeah, they're excellent.
I mean, that's my point is there's somebody out there that would love to jump all over chickens. There's gotta be with that.
Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, but that's a whole nother story. I did have another question. We go into dogs and cats, we go into more dogs and cats, then we go into vicious animals. And then dangerous dogs. Why do we delineate? Why not just have vicious animals and not delineate and delineate between dogs and animals? Why not just say a vicious animal? Is that a state statute reason?
No, but I think there's a real good reason for it, and that, you have dangerous dogs, there's a definition, if you read through the definitions, which you haven't had a chance to look at, it is certain categories, certain types of behavior. Then a vicious dog is a dog that has got some real serious actions involving substantial body harm. And then the other would be, there's a potential section 2, but in any event, they're trying to say, well, look at it, not all dogs conduct themselves in the same way. If you got a dangerous dog, or you have a dog that's potentially dangerous versus a dog that's actually vicious. And that's the reason, giving the courts some guidance of differentiating between the behavioral pattern. Now, I agree, I understand what you're saying, is it making it complicated, but it's intended to try to help the court be able to have a set of standards and categories, and that would then fit what the court felt would be the appropriate action to take with respect to that animal.
So let me ask you this, we have vicious animals, where in here do we cover dangerous animals and not dangerous dogs? I haven't had a whole time to review it, so it's not me trying to pop quiz, I'm just trying to understand.
That section,
Because
like
to what
Article
Mr. Eckert
5
was saying
Article-
earlier, is just can we, we don't want to overcomplicate it either,
Article 5 is dangerous dogs, it's applying to dogs.
right?
Didn't include cats, maybe it should be, but this was rifling in on the dog problem.
Right, then you have potentially dangerous, and vicious animals. Which
So
seems
under
complicated.
Under Article 4, it talks about inherently dangerous or destructive animals. So that includes your poisonous animals, those warm-blooded, wild exotic animals. That's where it covers those other ones. But unfortunately, most of our dangerous animals are dogs. That we have a dog that bites, and we need to have a procedural process so that if a dog does bite, we can petition and a hearing can be made, and we can then designate that dog either as potentially dangerous or dangerous, or if it creates severe injury or kills another animal or anything like that, it would be determined vicious. And the courts can then provide that designation, and then if the courts determine that owner can keep the dog in the city limits, then there are the parameters that have been established for some time. So that's why I suggested that the dangerous dog chapter probably had the most suggestions to help with that process. Unfortunately, we had several of these cases this last year, and we really needed some guidance.
Okay, let me read through it and make sure, I haven't had a chance to digest it, but that was just a quick question off the top of my head, why you did this versus that. So as I read it, it helps me to digest why you did what you did.
I think it gives him time, they can find out some more information for us,
Yeah.
and then we can come back and, Mr. Henry, what do you think, couple meetings?
But, let's see, what is the name of this ordinance here? Animals and fowl generally. I didn't see it, but what about exotic animals? Is that covered in here?
It's covered under that Article 4 of inherently dangerous or destructive animals. It talks about it's unlawful to keep, harbor, or own in any way possessed within the corporate city limits of the city warm-blooded, carnivorous, wild or exotic animals, not limited to non-human primates, raccoons, skunks, foxes, wild and exotic cats, excludes ferrets and small rodents of varieties for laboratory purposes, or any animal having poisonous bites. And that, we did not change, that has been in the ordinance for some time.
Okay.
Say that again, Mr. Bug?
It's illegal to have a parrot in the city, like a African gray parrot.
If it's considered an exotic animal, perhaps, but that would be something.
Yeah, they're all
We don't have anything specifically to address parrots or birds.
but they're pretty much still covered under that whole thing, and those are excluded.
Perhaps.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure on that. I have no idea. And then what about people that bring in invasive species? Would that be covered in that too?
Bringing what kind of species?
Like an invasive species that's not even listed in that? Like the boa problem down in Florida, they brought in an invasive species, they released it, that type of a, would that fall underneath that there too?
I would think so.
Okay.
I mean, it's,
I'm not an attorney, I'm
Yeah.
through all of it. so-
That's more under KDHE, I believe. That limits like mussels in rivers and ponds and
But
things.
it could be somebody who has a private animal that is
Right.
not listed in here that may or
That's
may
a
not
no.
be. So I just was asking about that, how that would be covered. Where that would fall, if it's whether underneath the state law or underneath.
I
our
don't
law.
think that the code sections address that at all. That invasive species issue probably has arisen since the inception of this code, probably should be specifically addressed.
I think what we need to know is where that would be covered, if it's not covered. may not necessarily need to be in here.
And maybe it's a state law.
Might be, yes,
State code.
state statute.
Yeah.
It sounds like Mr. Eckert's growing muscles in his bathtub, so.
How'd you know?
Any other questions for Mr. Jenkins? Mrs. Hughes?
Nope, I don't have any questions.
All right.
I have one follow-up just to ensure that we know what is expected. You mentioned more time for more information, other than the chickens and sending it to the K-State, group,
Extension office.
extension office, thank you. Other,
You had
issues you want us to follow up on?
If I do, I will contact you. I'll reach out.
Yeah, to give us a couple weeks to read it, and then we can probably send emails if we have questions or points we need clarified.
There's time, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I was gonna say, there's times I have insomnia probably that I will look through this and try to.
Firstly. Mr. Boswell?
Yeah, I have one other question on
Okay.
2-101 provisions, public nuisance, provision, where you're expanding to noise, odor, and damage.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just, in the definition, can that be considered like your neighbor doesn't like the smell of your barbecue, or is this just specifically referring to animals?
To animals.
It's just specifically referring to animals, it can't be.
It's not the cooking of animals.
To
Yeah.
think of anything else. That's, you know, cause I saw that video, I mean, sure, everybody's seen the video online about the neighbor calling the cops on the guy at barbecue.
Okay. Yep, no, I think it's just animals.
Yeah, that was in California that you're
That's
referring to.
crazy, California.
And we're not California.
All right. Anything else for Mr. Jenkins? Thank you very much, sir. It's the time for announcements and reports, and I have nothing, so Mr. Leeton,
I have none.
Mr. Eckert.
Yes, it seems like we get a lot of documents day of meeting, and if we could somehow make a good faith effort to change that up, because it's a lot of information to process in 3 hours before the meeting. So that is a concern of mine. I think that bit us a couple times tonight, is we haven't had time to dig into this and digest this, and sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles. I get it, but if we could be more attentive to that, it would be my request. And I'm not trying to burden you.
And I did touch base
Overburden
with
you.
Mr. Hendershot a couple days ago about that, to work on, we know that.
So otherwise, burr, stay warm out there, and check on your fellow neighbors.
Mrs. Hughes?
No comments at this time. Everything's good.
I just want to publicly acknowledge the loss that Marilis suffered, and I think the yellow ribbons throughout the community have been a wonderful awareness. And to Mr. Eckert's point, check on your neighbors, be there for people, and be sure to really listen. But other than that, no reports.
Mr. Hendershot, sir?
I do have one thing, Council President.
Okay.
I'd like to give a shout out in several different ways to our public works crews for their efforts on snow. This last snowstorm, if you want to call it that, was very unique in that it was spread out over 3 or 4 days. Never really got a lot of snow, but there was some ice and various things involved in that. I'd like for you to know that our crews, primarily under the direction of Andy Dudley, have taken spare parts from different areas of public works, tanks, pumps, motors, etc., and built our own brine application spray system. I think we've got about $1,500 in a multi-$1,000 type item if you were going to buy it. Not only is that, so what we're doing now is pre-treating many of our streets with that brine solution. Not only has that aided in the snow and ice melting, it's also allowed us now to change our type of salt from a magnesium chloride that we were buying at $123 a ton. We're now buying salt for $48.18 a ton because this salt brine solution is helping that pre-treatment and it gets the temperature, it helps that salt in really cold temperatures like we're seeing now. We'll still continue to have some mag chloride salt on hand for events like this weekend when it's just super cold, because the salt just doesn't work once we get down to some very cold temperatures. But that's we've cut our salt cost by 60% roughly. This last effort, over 4 days, we had 145 man hours in there, and the crews were able to put down, or not able, I'm looking for my salt totals here. 122 tons of salt was put down. And I believe that because of the brine solution that was put down earlier, that salt that we used was greatly reduced in quantity, let alone price. Because we all know that salt can be a very corroding substance. It gets in our stormwater drains, it gets on people's yards, etc. I just want to give a shout out to our street crews, because they've really gone above and beyond, developed our own application system, and I'm very impressed with that effort. I just want to bring that forward. That's all I have, sir.
Great to hear. Ms. Landis?
Well, he's talking about snow, but I'm thinking ahead to the Aquatic Center. So just as another announcement, we are actively recruiting for lifeguards, and since we will be able to train on site this year, and with the proposal that we'd like to bring to you in the future, we'll probably need a few more lifeguards than we normally have. And so if you're thinking about lifeguarding, this is a great time to get your application in, and we'll start working that process here very soon.
All right. Madam Secretary.
No, you do not want to see me in a swimsuit.
No report, thank you.
No, Mr.
Chief Henson.
No report.
Mr. Burton.
No report, sir.
Mr. Jenkins.
No report, Mr. President.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I said it, but I don't know.
We stand adjourned.
Aye.
There we go.
I'm here.
Okay. We're all
It was gonna carry with.
Yeah, it was gonna carry.
Yeah.
I was trying to find it.
And the word of the day is,
All your paper shake. I thought you were.
well, yeah.